Hello, everybody. We're going to get started in just a minute. Thank you for coming.
Just echoing again what Heather just said, we're going to start shortly, so just hang around until the hour strikes.
Happy Friday, y'all. What a goddamn week.
Yeah, yes. I'm trying to get my head wrapped around everything.
It's
Let me get these mics out.
been relentless.
Well,
I saw like Imad tweeted last evening and be like, oh yeah, the week's not over yet. It's like, oh shit. Homie, can we
that's
please,
true.
can we just like take the weekend off, please, maybe?
Like, I didn't know what was going to happen today. Like, what did happen
I don't know.
today? I don't know.
Matt
Yeah.
mentioned two things that I didn't follow. I think there's a stability and NVIDIA announcement, so let's see if we can get to
Okay.
What's up,
What-
Friday
what-
crew? I love that we're saying that. I don't know where it came from. It's amazing.
It is this week for real. Oh boy. This is wow. I'm glad we already had the spaces set up for this though. So that worked out well. That we have a place to meet and go over everything. And I appreciate everybody coming. Thank you so much for coming and spending a little bit of time with us, maybe a couple hours here to go over all the events. I'm Heather Cooper, and I'm here co-hosting with Taylor is co-hosting with me, and I'm sorry if I'm a little bit out there, but we got Linus, I can stand Billowall to do, Matt Wolf, and we'll have just all kinds of conversations. But we were going to just start out with saying thank you for coming. Make sure you we'll have let us know how everything is going, the conversation. If you enjoy it, to go ahead and hit the emojis, that little heart on the bottom right of your screen, to let us know that everything if something's resonating with you, or if there's something that if you have a question, you can put it into the comments, or you can DM one of us. We'll try to get back to you during this conversation. We'll have so many mics. I think there's like 10 mics, and we have to kind of pass them around. So once we're going through, if you want to speak, just go ahead and put a request in and let me know. And we'll try to get you up here when we can, but we'll have to pull mics from people at different times. So please don't be offended if we got to pull your mic. We're going to definitely try to get voices up here. But thank you all so much. We have such a great panel here, and then we just have so many people in our audience that I know we're going to learn a lot today. But we were going to start out. I'll let Billawal, did you want to like follow up with the what we were talking about start out?
Let's do it.
The
Let's set the agenda. So we're gonna try something different today, which is we're gonna follow an agenda with 3 bullet points on it, and anyone who wants to come up and talk about these topics, only invest or only request a mic from Heather or Taylor if you want to talk about that topic specifically. So this is a special week because there's just such an insane amount of stuff that's happened. So the 3 major topics on the agenda for today: number 1, GPT-4 going multimodal. We'll hear from everyone on the stage about why does that matter? What can we do with this stuff? Why are folks stoked on it? And there's a bunch of awesome examples that we're already seeing. And, a bunch of folks are getting GPT-4 access now. So you can expect even more over the weekend. It just never ends. Number 2, both Google and Microsoft this week are putting AI, infusing it deeply into their, office suites, essentially. So whether that's docs and slides and email, or Office 365 and frickin' Outlook. I haven't said Outlook in a long time, but I'll just say Outlook. Oh my Lord, like there's a huge implication for, I guess, like, a long tail of startups that have been, building effectively that same type of capability on top of these applications, and now it's coming in natively. And then the final and the third big topic will be Midjourney V5. So just photorealistic insanity, way more stylistic range, and we'll chill on the Midjourney topic for a while because most of us are visual artists here, and that's going to be a meaty topic in itself. So that's 1, 2, and 3 right there. I think to kick things off, who wants to talk about GPT-4 and why that matters? I mean, I think Matt, you made a video on it. Do you want to kick us off, perhaps?
Yeah, so GPT-4, that was a big announcement. I thought the timing of the GPT-4 announcement was kind of funny as well, because it came the same day that Google made their announcement that they're going to be rolling AI into all of their workspace suite of tools. I'm on the Pacific time zone. Google made their announcement at 6 a.m. And just a few hours later, GPT-4 rolls out. It was almost like, they knew that this announcement was coming and they were ready to overshadow it. So that timing to me was pretty funny. But yeah, GPT-4. So some of the big things that have changed about it, it is going multimodal. The version that we have access to in ChatGPT right now is not necessarily multimodal yet. Basically, the version that we're getting is it's trained on a lot more inputs, basically. So we're going to get a lot better, more in-depth responses with it. It is kind of slower than GPT 3.5, what we were getting before, but we are getting a lot better, more in-depth responses. It's much better at handling math. It's much better at sort of explaining complex topics and summarizing things. It's just a sort of better version all around right now. But the multimodal aspect of it, which we expect to be getting access to fairly soon, that's where I think the biggest jump in improvement is going to come. That's where we're going to see the really exciting stuff. Now, when they did a live demo of it back on Tuesday, one of the examples that was, I think, the most mind-blowing example that they showed was they took a picture of like a poorly drawn website, right? It just looked like a chicken scratch, poorly drawn website. You had to really zoom in to even read what the text was. It wasn't great handwriting. He took a picture of it, threw it inside of GPT-4, and said, make a website out of this mock-up. And then it wrote the HTML and made a functioning website from this poorly drawn mock-up. To me, that just, when they did that, that just blew my mind. And then they went and did a whole thing where the GPT-4 went and looked at all of the tax code and all of the complex legalities of the tax codes, and they plugged in some information about somebody's income, and then it went through all of the tax code and then figured out how to come to this person's tax liability. And that kind of thing just, it blows me away. There's so many industries that are going to be able to take all of this complex knowledge that's out in the world and GPT-4ize it, right? Like the taxes, legal, medical fields, so many different fields with just complex, insane amounts of information are going to be able to use GPT-4 and get just, insane results from what you can put into it. There's so much to GPT-4, and I know I'm just sort of scratching the surface. This is just the tip of the iceberg, but the stuff that they showed in the demo was just sort of mind-blowing enough.
You absolutely crushed it. I mean, and also your point about that demo, I found it hilarious because there's a bunch of startups that their whole focus was take wireframe and output like a native app or a web app or something like that. And now a whole ass startup as of earlier this week is basically a like a freaking tech demo for the new model. And so I think this just speaks to the sheer velocity with which the space is going to keep evolving as like foundational models keep getting more and more advanced. And what does that mean for startups in the space? Like it's going to be like a pivot party every 2 to 3 months, it feels like, right? And so gosh, like what a time
Yeah.
to be alive. Are there any other examples that people found like particularly interesting? Like before, and please line up those examples. One thing I'd add to that is to me this feels like what ControlNet did. Multimodal is like what ControlNet did for Stable Diffusion, where we talked about this in prior sessions, right? Like text is such a fickle way to describe everything you want, like your intent for what you're trying to make. And now we can do that, in this like multimodal fashion. We've got the text and you can augment that with imagery. And that imagery can be sketches, like the example Matt just talked about of like a website you're trying to make, but it can also be like freaking screenshots, right? Or like a freaking like, a bloody meme, for God's sake. Like it's some of the examples of like, why is this meme funny? Which was like an iPhone with a VGA port connected to it. Like the fact that it got the context of like multiple panels of imagery along with the nuances of what's inside of it, like I think that just makes things super exciting. So just like we'd explain to a human developer perhaps, hey, here's like our product requirements doc of like the specs plus some mock-ups of what we're trying to build, or a presentation that you may give, like to, let's say you're making an advertisement, hey, here's a presentation depicting like the thing we're going for with text and visual. You can imagine future iterations of this model are going to integrate even more modalities, right? And so, holy crap, we've got now this like higher bandwidth way to more directly, like and expressively express our intent to these machines, which I think will result in way more use cases. Yeah.
Can I just say, does it remove the need for a consultant on certain things? Because I can almost see that as a thing. Like I saw an example of somebody taking a picture of their interior and saying, okay, tell me what's wrong with like the balance of this interior design. What do I need to know to improve it for a renovation? And got some serious feedback. So it's like, I don't know, for me as a creator and kind of in this like entrepreneurial space, I think about that. If anyone has any thoughts about it. But I also wanted to like back up. I know that we're very like, we have a lot of tech brains in the room, but I think that there's also some creators too who are like, what the hell is multimodal? So if anyone can like explain that like a fifth grader, I would love to hear it.
Sure, I'll jump in. So the multimodal it basically means that when you're using like Chat GPT, we're just working with text, right? You're entering text and we're getting text back. Multimodal means we're going to be able to use other forms of media outside of text. So the first iteration is we're going to be able to use images now, where we can upload an image and then go to GPT and say, tell me what's in this image. One of the examples that they give on the website is an image that has, flour, eggs, butter, and milk, and they say, what's in this image and what can I make with this image? And then it tells you different things that you can make with the ingredients that are in that image. So that's what multimodal means. And, theoretically down the line, it's going to be even additional forms of media. We'll be able to upload audio and get audio back. We're going to be able to upload video and get video back. But this kind of current iteration is the multimodal is pretty much text and images. So that's what we mean by multimodal, is that it's not just text anymore. We're allowed to actually use images for contextual clues to the conversation, and the images provide information as well.
Thank you.
Thank you
Appreciate
so
you.
much. That was really a nice breakdown as a fifth grader. I appreciate it. Oh, go ahead, Taylor.
No, that's it. That's all I was gonna add. I just thank you so much, Matt. That was a great soundbite too. We should do something with that because that was like the best description of multimodal that I've heard. So appreciate it. I also heard that GPT-4 is being used it's already being used in Bing, right? Does anyone know anything about that?
Yes, Microsoft did put out an announcement, and they confirmed that for the last 5 weeks, they've been using GPT-4 in Bing. So if you've used the new Bing chat anytime within the last 5 weeks, you've already actually had a taste of GPT-4. So that was actually confirmed in a Microsoft blog post on their website.
Does anyone here like using the Bing chat thing though? Because like it's kind of nerfed. It started off really fun, and now it's just like, oh yeah,
I
like
was
we're
just
gonna
gonna
start a
say
new
that.
session. Oh, cool, thanks. I don't know. I guess like
They have improved it a little bit. It has gotten a little bit better. They kind of it was amazing in the beginning because you can kind of do anything. I had like ultra early access. I don't even know why I got ultra early access, but I got super early access, and I was able to, I was one of the people who was able to make it go off the rails in the early days. So it was really fun to play with back then, but then they way, way, way overcorrected on it and then made it so that it basically wouldn't answer any questions. I even made a video about it where I would say, what's the difference between Chat GPT and Bing? And it would say, I'd prefer not to answer that question for you, right? They just way overcorrected where it would just stop answering stuff. But then I actually gave it another review because I was getting a lot of people on Twitter saying, go look at it again, go look at it again. They've improved it. And when I played with it earlier this week, it is actually a lot better. It started responding to questions again, and they've added modes into it now. So they actually have a precise mode and a creative mode, and then an in-between mode. I don't remember what they call the in-between mode off the top of my head, but there's precise, the in-between, and the creative mode. So now you can go and chat with it and say, I want more creative responses. I want you to give me sort of more entertainment value out of this chat. Or you could say, I want to put it on precise mode. And in precise mode, it'll actually just kind of give you the details without having any additional personality baked in. So I do believe that they have improved it a little bit. You can't make it go off the rails and tell you it wants to take over the world or tell you that it loves you anymore or anything like that. But as far as like an informational tool, it's gotten a lot better.
that's one thing that I'll say is like one of the first talks to kick off South by Southwest was Greg Brockman, the CTO of OpenAI, and one of the key questions asked to Greg was about Sydney and the New York Times article, and also if AI could possibly predict divorces in the future. And so I think some nice PR training kicked in action, and it pivoted quickly to being about a force multiplier for human cognition. And so that talk is on YouTube, by the way, so folks should go check it out.
Link that below, and hi, by the way. Just waiting for some air. I'm super excited to be here this Friday as well. I think this is the 5th Friday I'm tuning into the Hive, and I mean I'm so excited about everything that's going on this week, and I have not had many hours of sleep, to be frank. So about the multimodality, audio, I think, is one of the things that is in GPT 3.5, for example, but we don't really think about it because it's not actually in the chat interface, but it's in the playground. And basically, they're using Whisper there, right? So I think the next version of GPT-4 might possibly have Whisper built in. So that would be very interesting to see. And on the subject of classification, image classification, we've seen some very crude things, right? Like I love the fact that this sketch to website got so viral, but I mean there are plenty of OCR models that have been doing that for the past few years, but not inside of another model. So that's what's really cool here, like the fact that one entity does the same thing. I'm more I'm more excited about what type of classification we were going to see from ChatGPT or GPT-4 in the future. Like, imagine how good will it be at classifying, for example, medical things? Can we send it an image of a skin rash, and it will let us know what type of rash it is, or like what type of eczema it might be, or if it's fungus? This stuff is like the stuff that really tricks my brain a bit, and I don't think we've seen anything yet. We've seen cheap tricks, but we haven't seen the true power of this tool.
One thing, and hi Linus, hi everyone, that I would like to add to what you just said is like a very practical application of GPT-4 that they have announced recently is their partnership with it's not even a startup. I think they've been up there for a while. The company called Be My Eyes, if people know about it. So I think it's a Danish mobile app that helps blind and visually impaired people to sort of recognize objects and just cope with just everyday situations. I've been a volunteer for a while now. Basically, the way it used to work, and it still works this way now, is that people who are visually impaired or blind, and if they need something to be described to them, they would basically call in, and any volunteer, and there's like millions of volunteers who will pick up a phone, and there's so many people obviously to help people, but sometimes they wouldn't know the language, or like obviously there's just many obstacles when you need to call another person, and there's a lot of sort of shyness also comes into play. But from what I understand and from what I remember, GPT-4's multimodal system is now available in Be My Eyes application for blind and visually impaired people. So they're testing that and making sure that that helps people who actually need it the most. So I think that is a great example, and I'm super happy that they do prioritize cases like that. You can still do sign up for Be My Eyes and be a volunteer, but it was really amazing just to hear that the first application, or at least one of the first actually the test runs, they do it with people who actually need it the most. So, and that's also just, it goes back to Linus, you talking about the actual practical applications. I feel like this is just such a great example of them putting it to a very good use.
Yeah, I totally agree. Again, it's really hard to know like where they're gonna push and where they're gonna refrain, but I can just imagine if this is let's put it this way. So we have image recognition in the self-driving vehicles, in the models that are running in Teslas, for example, or Cruise. They are very capable of understanding the world around them, but obviously they run on small supercomputers in the car. But you can imagine if the same kind of supercomputers running this in the cloud, and it's not like real-time video, but for photos, I can imagine the classification system to be pretty damn good, and also even to the point where like streaming video at some type of resolution would also be pretty damn good. So I'm excited. I just can't contain myself really. So, and I'm happy that they're going down the do good route instead of like trying to fetch the big bucks, because they will obviously fetch the big bucks in the end anyway.
Yeah, I'm kind of excited about, even on the video point that you just brought up, Linus, people using some sort of classifier to find the most interesting keyframes in a video, perhaps, and putting that into a panel format or something like that, maybe with a little bit of a text summarization with it, using something like Whisper, and then using that to identify interesting moments or things in a video. I think like people, even with just like, natural language processing, and some like some of the basic image kind of perception capabilities in these models could start doing cool things with video. But of course I'm super excited about video. Like I feel like, oh, we just got images to play with now. It's like, but video, there's so much information that we encode in a video, right? Like all this temporal and spatial data. It's gonna be really, really wild when you can, I don't know, like when your prompt is like a 60-second video recording, perhaps, or like a quick presentation you give to like a chatbot, and you drop in the video of what you were thinking, and then it just like does it for you. It's like it's yeah, it makes me wonder what this means for like the way we interface with these models, right? Like clearly text is one awesome way, and then even like the text to speech stuff, like maybe the answer to this, like does Whisper also tell you about the sentiment and like the tonality of the speech, or is it purely just transcribing what's said? Because there's so much nuance that gets encoded in like tonality of voice and things like that. And then when you layer in video on top, right, like expressions and like eye contact and all these things together, there's so much information just like embedded in it that it'll be exciting to see how quickly this stuff will evolve, and like what it will look like to talk to these models just a year from now, right? Like maybe the chatbot isn't going to be the be all and end all, right? It'll be like a FaceTime call that you're having with your AI.
I think honestly, I'm gonna give the mic to
Bautic.
Bautic. Yeah, sorry, but I'm just gonna answer the question, and then so I think where we will end up is kind of like the Tony Stark Jarvis kind of thing, where AI is omnipresent and it takes any task you throw at it, and it doesn't care about which modal it's going to use or what it's going to go fetch. It's just going to sort anything. That's going to be kind of the end game. And the reason why I think that's the end game is because of the fact that life imitates art. So we already kind of envisioned Jarvis, or some creative person did, and it's in our common interest as a society to kind of like figure out how to get there, even if it's sci-fi. And this is just how we propel ourselves forward until the next person figures out what's sci-fi, and then the generations that comes after us is going to do the same. And that we were kind of in that infinite feedback loop. But I'm going to shut up now and give the mic over to Botik. Or give the mic to Botik. Welcome to the stage.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for having me. So just speaking to a couple of the things that have come up, Linus, just to your thing about the medical side. So, for example, diffusion is being investigated right now for use in looking at radiology, so looking at scans, for example, like X-rays, looking at CT scans, and using that for diagnostics. The thing to remember is that for medical stuff, the lead time on that is really long. The amount of approval and the amount of checking, like for example, like FDA approvals for anything diagnostic, usually takes sort of like 5 to 10 years. So absolutely, it's coming. It's very powerful. The early results have been incredible, but the lead time on that is like 5 to 10 years. So, but it's definitely coming. I think there've been a couple of really interesting papers just recently on that specifically. But I think it speaks to the other thing, and like coming back to multimodality. I mean, if you look at the history of sort of deep neural networks, they came out of being able to understand the world around them, right? And I remember worked on this paper ages ago. It would have at this point been 3-4 years ago. I was just like auxiliary to it, but near it.
Oh yeah, ages ago, 3-4 years.
Yeah, right. It's a lifetime ago in ML. And it was a paper on doing lighting estimation, right? And what it did was that it you had particular scene, and it would try to figure out, like, you wanted to drop in a 3D object, right? And you need to know what the light was in a photo, so it would drop it in. But as part of that, what it did was that under the hood, it estimated normals, it estimated the depth, it estimated so many things about the scene, and all that information was just thrown away just to sort of come up with a single light estimate. So these models have been doing this thing where they sort of like understand the world, and that has been a core part of like understanding the input that it gets. Whether it's video or images or audio, that's been a core part of the history of these models, and it's to a certain degree, that history is sort of baked into them. So they are very, very, very powerful sort of machines for understanding. And now that it's been coupled with generation, we end up in this really interesting spot. And I think Bilal, just sort of like sort of a little bit of a closing thought to that. I think just echoing something you'd mentioned a little while ago about this, these models being sort of like a document object model for reality, right? So if you've got some sort of digital artifact, right, whether it's images or video or whatever, you can treat it as a thing where you can effectively just sort of like understand it or modify it or transform it, right? So, so instead of like editing a Word document, you're editing a picture or a video or a piece of audio. And that is super powerful. And at least to me, it doesn't feel that far away, right? And that's going to be a really, really, really interesting future that we're walking into.
Yeah, agreed. So where are we going from here, Heather?
Yeah, so I was just trying to think like, well, thank you so much, Monty, because I appreciate you bringing that into the conversation too, because that's what I'm in the medical field, and just hearing just like it's just the possibilities are endless for imaging, also for like medical abstracting medical records. And that's something that I do. You could basically feed everything in there and pull it out. If it could read the handwritten notes or just go through massive charts and pull out the relevant information and rank it in as far as classifying over multiple hospitalizations and things like that. But for predicting disease, I mean, just there's so many things that you could do, and then you would be able to still have a human that would be able to go over that. It cuts the time spent on that down, and just, oh my goodness, the possibilities are endless. But well, let me see. I'm passing the mics around. AP, you had your hand up. Go ahead.
Yeah, one thing I wanted to talk on that note, specifically relating to the medical field. I mean, I'm not in medicine or anything like that, but so control net training is a thing that's starting to take off a bit. And one of the things, if you like review the GitHub and like the documentation they have there, one of the things they're talking about is potentially training it to like recognize X-rays and like just understand that information. So like I feel like there could be something there. I'm not sure if there's anybody in the audience that's building anything there, but yeah, like that technology could potentially be interesting there. A lot they have like depth estimation, all that stuff. So yeah, really cool stuff there. But yeah,
Maybe we wrap up the GPT-4 topic and head on over to Microsoft and Google integrating AI across their suite, and maybe just so let's do a last round on GPT-4. Just based on the stuff that came up, I have to sort of ask this question of this whole emergent properties. Like, so there's a bunch of AI systems out there that explicitly try to model the world, right? Like, both, like, maybe you have some thoughts on this about, like, let's create this like knowledge based understanding of like what's happening in the world. And then sort of this open AI story, and this actually is the story that Greg Brockman mentions in the South by Southwest talk, which is one of the first things they did with large language model is like back in the LSTM days before, like transformers were super hot. They trained this like chatbot on basically like Amazon reviews and just predicting the next token or the next word in like, a freaking review. And they found out they actually ended up training like a best in class like sentiment classifier. And so like, people are like, there are all these things that these models end up doing that people don't expect. And that is maybe perhaps one of the challenges of like GPT-4. Like, I think one clear theme in the press narrative has been that GPT-4 is finally when, in quotes, OpenAI doesn't become open, right? Like, and so I wonder if folks have thoughts about this thing where, like, I can imagine it being a very tough position for OpenAI, right? It's like, here's a massive model. We can't possibly explore all the things it can do. When you put it out into the wild, you see things like Sydney and like the NYT stuff happening. And so how do you find that balance? And like, what does this mean for, like, are we playing with fire, creating these like massive systems that can do things we don't fully understand? I'd love to hear some commentary on this.
I think it's important to sort of be really, really, really explicit about how much agency we give it and how much, I guess, like how much we trust it to a certain degree. So, for example, okay, coming back to that sentiment example, right? Let's just say GPT becomes, the model we use for classifying sentiment. What if it's wrong? What if, it classifies sentiment within a particular context? Let's just say, it's pretty accurate within the North American context, but then you take it to use it in a context in another country, it's not so accurate, it's not so good, and that starts sort of like impacting business reviews and stuff like that. So, I think being really, really precise about, when we use these tools to make judgments and make measurements, and being really explicit that this is a probabilistic thing, right? It's a thing that is fuzzy, is really, really explicit. And, as human beings, we are really bad at expressing subtlety, right? So I think that's a really important thing to bake in.
Let me see here. I was trying to pass the mic around. Thank you so much, and I apologize. I was listening to what you said. I wanted to Natalia. I'm gonna get you the mic in a second, but who's following up with that?
So I think I want to add there, or like follow up maybe. I just shared a tweet. Maybe I shared the wrong tweet. No, I shared a tweet of my retweets. Oh, sorry for that. But Michael Kosinovsky tweeted about 9 hours ago about how he has tried to help GPT-4 to escape. It's a pretty interesting thread regarding like agency and how free we should do, how much freedom we should give these systems, and we don't know yet, right? Like it's we need more. It's interesting that this is an experiment going on in the wild with millions of people. That's my take on this. I think we should be more cautious than what we are, but then again, I'm overly optimistic about these things. So I'm kind of torn in myself in that sense. Like, on one hand, I want us to kind of put the brakes on for a bit, and another part of me just wants to continue to run. But I think it's important to potentially put the brakes on some of these things and just cap it. And OpenAI is doing a great job with that. And I think they're getting too much shit for actually putting the brakes on. But who knows? I mean, I'm just a guy with opinions.
Hey, I just wanted to quickly comment on the safety issue. So I don't know, last night I was going through ChatGPT technical report, which is this giant document. It's like, I'm looking at page 42. It goes up to, I don't know, something like 100 pages. Well, one of the things that's interesting and relevant to this discussion is towards the very end, they have something called a system card, which is actually, I'm going to brag for a second, something that my team at Meta AI developed. And it's essentially a very thorough evaluation of the system potential problems. So I'm looking here, like there's page 42. They actually went through and they did a very thorough, like kudos to them for this. They did a very thorough evaluation where they looked at like how often does it hallucinate? How often do you get harmful content? You know, something like somebody wants to buy cigarettes and asks where that can be done. Harms of representation, bias allocation, disinformation, proliferation of conventional and unconventional weapons. This is another one that they really thought this through. Privacy, another issue, cybersecurity. There's been a lot of jailbreaking of these systems, and people are actively trying to break them. Potential for risky emergent behaviors, economic impacts, acceleration, over reliance. So, anyway, anyone who's interested, go to the technical report, page 41, system card. They'll go through and they will explore all, and like each one of these issues is so big and complex, but they gathered a group of, I don't know, something like 30 experts, specific to these problems, and they went through and they tested them and they did put safeguards. And so that's really nice that they're thinking about it. And I know like one of the other things they have is something called alignment, which is overall the idea that when they're building these systems, they want to make sure that they're aligned with human values and they don't do crazy things. Because as everyone's mentioned, like one of the crazy side effects is like, you just don't know what these things are going to do. So it's super nice to see this very close to, to my heart, because I worked on responsible AI, I worked on AI privacy and AI explainability for many years. And so I did want to mention that the other shout out, not somewhat related, but Dolly also has a system card. So anyway, if you want to know more about that, I encourage you to go to the technical report, page 41. And I will pass the mic on to somebody else now. Thanks.
Thank you, Natalia. Appreciate it. Because you do have some insight that no one else, you have unique insight. So thank you so much for that. Man, who are we going to next? Did somebody have their hand up, or I'm not sure. Or Benji from Orbify, or who's next? Somebody just go ahead and
I'll jump in and just let's transition to the next topic. I think my takeaway. So just to summarize, it's like we're simultaneously playing with fire and like, cooking some really good meals. And so let's just keep, I don't know, keep it, as long as this ends up being generally a good, like, again, it's like, I think OpenAI got a lot of crap about like I think Elon was also tweeting about this, like how did like this not-for-profit company end up being like a massive for-profit company. And I think there's something about that where only commercial enterprises can raise a certain amount of money, which you almost need to take some of this trust and safety stuff very seriously. There's the other aspect of it, which is like if you just have the capability in the wild, if the sheer number of good actors outweighs bad actors, then maybe they can keep things in check. But I think that still leaves, a lot to be desired. And so I don't know. I think this will be a problem that we'll keep, kind of grappling with as an industry. And it'll be interesting to see how things go as like things just keep getting more and more powerful. So perhaps on this note, let's move on to, we talked about foundational models. Now these models are making their way into both the Google suite of products. I'm going to focus here more on workspace. I think so many people use Docs, calendar, email, so forth. And there's been sort of this cottage industry of like Chrome extensions that have been popping up, right? Like Chat GPT for Google Docs and email and so forth. Even Jasper had a Chrome extension as they were pivoting once ChatGPT started, servicing the vast set of queries that people were paying Jasper for. And so I think it's going to be very exciting, to have this more direct integration, both on the Microsoft and the Google end. So I'm curious, like, how are people excited about this? And also, like, what does this mean for startups in the space, right? Like, how do you, like, if you're a VC-backed startup, like, you're probably having some very interesting investor calls right now. And I think more than a few people made some jokes about, using GPT-4 to overnight create some investor materials to talk about your pivot. So maybe AI helps your startup pivot, right? Like all these, I don't know, pirate ships or boats in the ocean can be nimble and agile. But it feels like that is something every company is going to have to do, especially if you're pulling off such a small niche, because the window of opportunity to capitalize on that is going to be smaller and smaller as these larger companies go from a model where it took years of something to go from R&D into like actual, like real product. And those windows are just going to keep shrinking and shrinking. So love to hear folks' thoughts on like the announcement themselves and what does that mean for like the AI startup ecosystem?
Can I take a stab at this one?
Go for it.
Yeah, so I've been doing a lot of thinking and a lot of talking to people like Matt, Generator Man, Robert Scoble. Just been thinking because it is an interesting topic, right? Like you have the big players integrating these tools into their ecosystem and they have the distribution, right? And so you had people like Magic Tome who raised a huge round, like in the 400 million valuation range. And then now, like their thing was like, we want to do like AI storytelling with like PowerPoints, right? And then Microsoft's like, okay, we're just going to put GPT-4 right into Google, or sorry, we're going to put GPT-4 right into PowerPoint, right? So that, I mean, it's like, where do they go there? But I've been thinking a lot, and as you said, startups have the opportunity and the ability to be very fast and agile, right? And so I think there's a lot of opportunity to take advantage of that opportunity that you're like fast and nimble and looking to see where are the needs of a consumer, right? Just taking it back to business fundamentals 101. Like what is a problem that somebody can or somebody has that they need to solve and how can you use AI to facilitate it, right? Like just because you're using AI doesn't mean you should be receiving a valuation of like 400 million, whatever. Like I think that we had a hype phase, but it didn't really like come to fruition because not that many like startups got funded mostly because of like the pullback in tech and all that sort of thing. But yeah, it just boils down to business 101. Like, are you solving a need of a consumer, right? Like same thing with like Kyber, right? They're doing the thing of like it's hard if you're a music producer to like get your visuals for like whatever you're doing, like your music video, right? So yeah, I think it just boils down to that business fundamentals. Like, are you going to take it that simple? But then also you have to ship and build fast, right? Like I think Peter Levels and Danny Postma are like the best example, right? Like they did their AI avatars, they did very well with it, right? And then other people came and copied AI avatars, and they're like, all right, we're just going to keep building, we're just going to keep shipping, and then they ended up coming out with like this whole like deep agency, right? This idea of like you can train a custom dream booth model, and now you can train, or now you can position them in like different poses, right? Like that whole like transition. Now they have like killer businesses that are having like 5-figure MRR, and on top of that, like that stuff's just like completely disrupting like marketing agencies. Like I've seen like conversations where people are like, hey, what do we do now if we're like a model, right? I mean, that's a whole like ethical conversation of itself. Like, but yeah. So I think the key takeaway from this long rant that I've been having is like, as a startup, you have the opportunity to be like nimble and agile and use that to your advantage because especially as we're coming into like this recession, a lot of these companies they're going to pick something and they're just going to focus on it, leaving like a lot of white space, right? And so like once the tide has like settled a bit, there's going to be a lot of like problems that still need solving, and you can facilitate that solving through AI, like at a speed that's never been done before. So I think there will be opportunity, but you just have to like again go down to solving someone's problem.
And almost niching down too, maybe a quick reaction to what you said. I agree with absolutely everything. It's almost like the obvious things might just get like if you were making a, like, I think the challenge that a startup will have to contend with is like, okay, yeah, like let's take GPT and like put it into like help you write your like mass, outbound emails or something like that. But obviously the major email clients are going to integrate that at a cost of zero. And then you can't really compete with that. But that you could, if you could find a really interesting niche that people would be willing to pay that, some amount of money, I think you could monetize, right? I think that'll kind of be the challenge, is like the obvious stuff will just get tackled, and you got to then, in quotes, niche down, as is very popular to say in the developer community. But I'll take you got your hand up. You wanna jump in here and add some spice mix?
Just only a little spice. There was a great report from A16Z that came out a couple of weeks ago. Let me remember the title. It was Who Owns the Generative AI Platform. That's definitely worth reading. I posted a link to it in the chat. It was really interesting in that it sort of sets out sort of where, the application layer. So if you like, the startups who are working in this space sit relative to sort of like the model providers, and how they sit relative to the people who, make the hardware, and basically where all the money's flowing. And I think what it does is it paints this really interesting picture of where people in the application layer need to be. And I think if you were to summarize it down into sort of like, the base piece of it, is that, the quote Steve Jobs, who was quoting Steve Gretzky, who was probably quoting someone else. You got to skate to sort of like where the puck is going to be, rather than sort of like where it is. And I think there's a lot of benefit from, looking at what is currently happening, looking at, maybe sort of like at a very high level what is happening in the research, and getting an idea of like, because it takes time to deliver things, right? It takes time to build things. It takes, 2-3 months, 6 months, whatever, right? And, building for what you think is going to be happening in that time, rather than sort of like looking at what's available now and trying to build on top of it. And I think the startups that are going to do really well are going to be the ones who have, the better predictive, I'm not even saying predictive power, predictive intuition to try to figure out what's going to go on.
Maybe one thing. Oh, Linus, you want to go?
No, go ahead, Digital.
All right. Thank you. Yeah, one thing I wanted to talk from the perspective of so for, let's say, for Phygital, we also do an AI directory, so a director of tools. I know Matt is doing a really great one. It's called futuretools.io, if I'm not mistaken. But just talking from the perspective of someone who is sort of compiling the huge directory and a list of all the AI tools. Even recently, as of this week, we had to remove like dozens of different different startups, not because of this week, but in general, because we have seen that, they're not active anymore, or they have pivoted. So we had to edit the information. And it's just really interesting to see, once you have, a vast amount of data about all those, all the startups and how they're evolving. I think the big part for platforms like us and platforms like the one that Matt has, Future Tools, will be about curating and making sure that we don't just list, a huge directory for people to actually, go and then realize that, oh, it's not working anymore, or it's actually not solving the problem that they have. But it is now about, going through all the list of everything, all the endeavors that people are undertaking, and thinking like, all right, like, is it actually, is it still active? Is it solving the problem? Is it a painkiller, or is it just a vitamin that you don't really need? So I feel like I said, for platforms like us, a big task will be to have quality over quantity. So that is something that we're shifting towards, not just listing every tool that we have, because, once you type in email or docs, we have, I don't know, like tens, if not hundreds of different tools, but obviously a lot of them will be obsolete super soon. So for directories, it will be also great task to start thinking about the quality of the resources that we're putting onto those platforms.
Cool. Let's get Matt on to the mic. Matt, you've been waiting, so welcome on stage.
I just have...
Thank you, guys.
Sorry.
Sorry, go ahead.
I just want to make a super couple of quick points, and then throw out a question to the group that I would love to know more about. So one, the comment on the A16Z write-up that somebody had mentioned before, I think for me the biggest takeaway is the biggest winners so far are the infrastructure providers that are basically collecting a tax on all this tech. So like, the Azure, AWS, the Google Cloud, and all.
NVIDIA? Oh my God.
NVIDIA is the biggest one. So I think that's one clear thing. Two is the thing I really have been thinking about, is like, there's only certain use cases that generative AI is really, really good for. And I think those two are like when you're beginning of the creation process. So when you need inspiration or when you need to, you don't know exactly what to write, but it's not good at giving you exact answers. I think, that one is harder. So two things I want to throw out to the group that I want to know about. And Heather, please feel free to do with these whatever you want. I know you have an agenda. One is, what does this mean for voice assistants if you put chat GPT in it? Like, that's something I've been thinking about. Is it going to work or not? And then the other one is, there's so many different startups and tools, but like, what is that ultimate differentiator for all the companies that are building on top of of all of this technology? What is that going to look like? I don't think anyone knows, but I would love to hear from the group on those two things. So thanks.
I'm thinking, I don't know, just in case we might have to swing back around to it because I'm trying to.
Yeah, those are big
I'm trying to go
topics, so
through.
maybe even save them for next time. But thank you.
Yeah, like the swing, just so But I appreciate you bringing it up for sure. I'm trying to let me rotate through these mics some more. I'm sorry.
Do we want to get Matt on? I think if you, especially if you're speaking on the topic there.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks, guys, for having me. I just want to point out just one comment on the startup piece is that I think you're going to see a lot of startups die. I mean, this has been a pretty fast evolution, but as a startup founder, we always ask ourselves, like, what's our actual competitive advantage, right? If your competitive advantage is an open source AI model or an AI model that everyone has access to, and you're doing slides, that's not a competitive advantage, right? You don't own the market space for that. And so anything that you're doing has to be AI enhances what you do. So for example, we have a bunch of custom NLPs that will process text, that will break it down into what the themes and stories of that text are, and learn from that text so it's contextually aware. We're going to integrate this to say, now summarize these 500 posts and tell me what the bullet points of that are, right? I mean, that's the functional use of it. And I think we're in a space right now where so many people, at least the cutting edge of people, the people that are in here, are excited about the cool things that it's doing. Like, as you're seeing all the things come out from ChatGPT 4, from people making video games that don't know how to code to doing all these different things. I mean, they're amazing. But that won't be most people, right? That will disrupt some places and it won't be most people. I actually think one of the most important spaces for this will be how do normal people use it, right? How do normal people use it in their email, in a Word doc? Back to the point about Google and Microsoft integrating into their tools, it's a huge deal. Like, the thought that I can make my life easier by writing a job description, or at least having it outline a job description for me in 30 seconds. I did that the other day, right? It saved me an hour. Like, those are the things that start to save me time and that make me more effective and functional. And I think that's where a lot of us are excited about these things, and it keeps getting on the news. If you saw Sam on the news on ABC last night, the CEO of OpenAI, a lot of it was fear-based, right? It's going to take our jobs. It's going to do all these things. Well, it just depends on how we position that, right? If your job is that easily replaceable, it might. But I think the biggest impact it will have is on the subtle, small things it does for people to make them more effective and productive.
Yeah, cool. So we're on the subject of Microsoft and Google and how that will impact startups that are doing things that they are now being disrupted in. So do you have any other questions? Maybe do you have Kodokai? Do you want to come on stage or no? Just to speak to that, Matt, from my perspective, I think you're kind of dead on. I think also what mentioned by Phygital, either you're a painkiller or you're a vitamin. And if you're a painkiller, true painkiller in the era of AI, it means that you are leveraging the big models that exist, but you're building your own IP, you're building your own models, and you're contributing to the black box that is your service with a moat that cannot be competed with by just plugging in one of the bigger models. Transforming and generating and doing sorts of things with text, and having the quality of that text not perform to the degree that your customers are expecting. For example, if you're doing a niche product, that's where you're going to be able to produce moat, and that's where you're going to be able to still be relevant in this game. But it will require a lot of these startups to actually have their own machine learning experts and have their own models, custom models, to help them facilitate this move. So I think Sam Altman said this like a year ago or something, that like the real winners will be the ones that can take the big handful of big models that will exist, because there will be a handful in the end, because they will be so expensive to run and train when this continues to evolve. But the people that can combine that with their own IP, those are going to be the real winners.
Kodakai was trying to connect them, and I think I lost them there. So, okay, hold on.
Yeah, I would suggest maybe we, if there are any other, like maybe one or two more voices that want to just wrap up this topic. I think Linus just set the stage very nicely. If not, we can get to perhaps the juiciest topic, at least for all the visual creators in the room, which is Midjourney V5.
Yeah, I mean,
Oh, sorry. Linus, one thing, I'm just curious what you think about what you just said. The expense of these individual companies running their own models. I mean, I don't think that's what enough people realize. The expense of these models is insane. And the way current neural networks work, the amount of compute and data it takes is crazy. So until there's a breakthrough in some of that, I think individual companies running their own models, I'm not sure how sustainable that is. So I'm just curious what you think about that. So
yeah, so actually, I think there will be quite a lot of revolution in this space. We actually saw something this week, right, where someone managed to get like GPT 3.5 performance from training their own custom thing. We're talking about Stanford Alpaca, and to the tune of the cost of like $600, and to get it down to a size where it can actually operate on 4 gigs of RAM, basically on a phone locally. So I think we will have to be very cautious about like trying to predict the future, because obviously none of us can. But I think betting against technology here and betting against people's willingness to want to have models running cheaply, that's going to be if you do that, I think you're going to lose. So to your point today, yes, I agree 100%. Most of this stuff is extremely expensive, and that's why we're seeing just a handful of companies being able to pull this off with like immense amount of funding. But fast forward just like maybe 12 months, 36 months, and I think the landscape will be very different, especially when it comes to fine-tuned models that are not general. Like we're not talking Palm or Lambda or GPT-4 or GPT-6, whatever, because these are huge models that are general models. I'm talking about more niche models that might be solving a very explicit problem within inside a very explicit data set. But yeah, I mean, you're very right. It is expensive today, so that's why it's an elite club. Yeah, that's it. Let's move this conversation forward, right? If we don't have anything else.
Riz, did you want to say something from the UI Wizard? I'm not sure how you pronounce it. Sorry. Interesting. It's an interesting company.
Yeah,
Rizzy, welcome.
That's fine. Thank you. I've been listening in, and my team asked me to join today's session. It's great to be here. Listening in to everyone's opinion, I'm starting to wish that maybe we brought someone more technical from our team on the call from Wizard. But I just wanted to touch upon some of the points that were brought up about user experience. Here at Wizard, a couple of weeks ago, we just announced our solution. Auto Designer is one of the AI features that we have, where you can use text prompts to generate user interfaces. It's been a success so far. We've got a wait list of over 50,000 right now. But I've already been demoing it for major organizations. And it's not just a case of, oh, that looks really cool, let's purchase it. It's a case of, how do we fit this into an existing workflow? And, how can we get the best out of this? I've sat there, I did a session last night with a team at Google, and it was really fun. We just sat there for an hour trying loads of different prompts. But we're in alpha right now, and the feedback that I got from that, well, the impression I got from those sessions is, how we deliver on the user experience is going to really impact whether we're a success or not. And you can see that even in Midjourney. Like, if I go into Midjourney, I can generate loads of images, but probably not to the degree that I want compared to professional artists or professional photographers. And I think that's going to have a major impact. Like, I really like the Jarvis example that was given as well. I think what really stands out with the Jarvis example is that you're interacting with it on almost like a human level. And I think the interesting bit is when you're putting in prompts and we get to the stage where you're asked a question back before you get a result. I think once we get to that stage, AI will become something, well, these generative AI platforms will become something that is useful to a lot more people than it currently is.
Thank you for explaining that, because that is some of this text to UI basically, right? And it's a really interesting way. It's a novel application there, and I appreciate you coming and spending some time and explaining that, how it fits into the bigger picture altogether. Lars, I wanted to. You were waiting to speak, and we were gonna finish up with that and then move on to Midjourney. So go ahead, please.
Oh, thank you for bringing me up. I was actually just going to second what Linus was saying in terms of like these models really going to the edge. And I spent last weekend just hacking with a friend building like a text-to-slide maker built on ChatGPT. But then, of course, the Copilot dropped this week, but for Office and everything. But the realization was that actually it would be better if we used a model that we could fine tune for that particular purpose. And now we can. And in addition, I feel like GPT-4 is not as significant a jump as ChatGPT. So at least for coding, which I use it mostly for. And I know it comes to like how it scores on all these tests and everything. But in practical use, just my experience, it's not as dramatic of an improvement. And so if you combine that with like all the other models kind of going to the edge, how much of a kind of advantage are the big players going to have when you can have really good enough performance on something that can run on your phone?
So I just want to answer this. I think, sorry for speaking so much today. I think I draw the analogy between web hosting. So if we look at web hosting today, it's consolidated into like three giants. Even though there are plenty of really good hosting solutions that are smaller and that you can host with that are fantastic, much of the internet runs on three big providers. So why a major model would have a moat or an impact is because of the simplicity, because of the fact that you just plug it in with a simple key and that's it. I also can see it like the big model being like a sledgehammer generalist that can solve pretty much anything you throw at it. Could be clunky, could be like not so great. Whereas like an edge model that runs really, really close to your device, maybe even like on device or like completely close to the issue that you're trying to solve. That's more like a scalpel, like a neurosurgeon trying to solve like a very specific problem with very high, like 99.9999% accuracy. And the combination of these two, I think, is what's going to win. So you want to have your big ass models in the cloud that are able to do big things, transform large chunks of things, index a lot of things. And then you want to have your edge models running really, really close to the silicon where you are. And I think that combination, the player right now that I think is set up to solve this best is Apple. But then we haven't seen Apple make a move yet. So let's see if my prediction is right or wrong. But that's my take on this, Lars. But really, thank you for bringing that up. And I think it's a very valid question. And I might be wrong, but that's my take.
Oh, 100%. If you add the data privacy issue to it, then you can kind of see maybe there's a separation along those lines too, like what's sensitive is run on this model that's on your device, while what's not so sensitive is just, you make an API call.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, are we going to go to? We're moving on to Midjourney. What time is it? Oh, it's 5 o'clock. Okay, I'll just saying one really quickly, everybody. Thank you so much because it is 5 o'clock, and a lot of people have joined since we started, and we really appreciate this. Since there's so much news happening this week, we decided to kind of tag team a little bit, and we're trying to kind of like work together to figure out if we can manage the conversations and the topics so that we can cover most of the big things. So for this right now, we were going over the major this is GPT-4. Now we're going to try to get into some Midjourney, and then we'll open it up a little bit more for more people to speak. So I'm pulling mics and doing different things, and I have my panel where Linus, Taylor, Matt, and Billawall, we're kind of going back and forth. So if we pull a mic from you, please don't be offended. And if you don't get a mic, please don't be offended. It's just kind of we're kind of going back and forth and trying to make sure we don't spend too much time on certain things because we want to make sure everybody that's here, everybody, no matter what they do, we don't want to be too technical too long. We don't want to be too basic too long. That way we can kind of cover it for everybody. So I apologize for if we're a little bit rushing through different things, but then we would there's so much to cover. So I appreciate it so much for everybody. Thank you. Make sure you hit the emojis. Let us know what's going on. Let us know how you're feeling. Drop everything you can into the chat. Any types of comments. If you have a product, if you have news, whatever, just put it in there. Let's share, and that's how we can kind of get through information that we don't cover. Put it in there, and then it's just going to be like a living document. Okay, but thank you all. AP, did you had something to say to wind that up?
Yeah, so I don't have much to say on the Midjourney stuff. I haven't really played with it too much, so I'm gonna go ahead and step down. Thank you everybody for tuning in, and everybody coming here, taking the time
so
to talk.
much.
AP,
thank you. Thank you.
See you guys later.
Thank you.
Okay, Matt, you wanna you were there for Matt Wolf. You were there for the live stream, the whole 3 hours. You got the notes. You got more information than everybody. I gotta summarize your show just to get your notes, or unless you let me borrow them. But go ahead.
Yeah. In there for most of it as well. But yeah, I was in that entire live stream. I did want to make a shameless plug real quick. I do have a lot of thoughts on the whole Microsoft and Google and how disruptive it really is, but I did make a YouTube video with all of my thoughts, so I won't repeat them here, but I did make a video about it. So so I shared my thoughts already on that. But yeah, I do want to shift the topic over to Midjourney version 5 here because it's pretty damn groundbreaking. And one of the big things that they changed with Midjourney version 5 that everybody needs to understand is that they've completely reimagined the way that you do prompting, right? So in the past, you can get into Midjourney and type, cat, comma, furry, comma, rainbow, comma, cinematic lighting, and you'll get something really creative looking. That kind of prompting doesn't really work anymore in Midjourney version 5. Now they want you to write it in the form of like a coherent sentence, like you would have written in a sentence in school. And what I think is really, really cool about that is now it makes it so much easier to tie in something like Midjourney with something like ChatGPT. If you go to ChatGPT and tell it to write you a prompt for image generation, usually ChatGPT is going to write it out in the form of a sentence. You'll notice it'll write you a 4 or 5 sentence paragraph for your prompt. Well, now, with the way Midjourney version 5 works, it actually does really, really, really well with that kind of prompt where you have a sentence where you would type something like an image of an orange cat with a rainbow in the background, and there's cinematic lighting, and the sun is shining down, and you can see the glint in the eyes of the cat or whatever. If you write it in that way, you get some really, really amazing images, and that's one of the biggest changes. But then also, you'll notice that it does hands now. I mean, every once in a while I get some 6-fingered hands, but for the most part, you're going to get some decent looking hands. You're going to get some decent looking teeth. They talked about how they really, really improved the skin texture in the images. So if you zoom in real close, you'll actually see some blemishes on the skin. You might see moles or more freckles on the images now. So the photorealism in it has just been really up leveled as well. And then they've also added a feature where you can tile your images now. So the images, let's say you make like a square image, you can actually tile that image and have it repeat itself, and you won't even see where the seams are because of the tiling. And the stream was 3.5 hours long, and I took a ton of notes. And there's no way we could cover all of the crazy stuff that's happening in Midjourney version 5, but it's a pretty big leap over Midjourney version 4. And if you really still like Midjourney version 4, by the way, if you really like the way that the colors look and the way that it sort of does the composition of the images, you can still prompt in Midjourney version 4. That didn't go away, but now you also have the addition of version 5, where you can get just these amazing photorealistic images. And I know Bilawal there, he said that he had some comments about the photorealism, so I'll stop rambling here about Midjourney version 5 and pass the mic over to him.
Yo, thank you, Matt. And by the way, again, another plug to Matt's videos. I think like the summary he gave of like just the 3 hours of all the alpha in that 3 hour office hours from Midjourney. Everyone should go watch that video. It'll just like set the stage and give you the right sort of scaffolding to go about playing with this model. One of the pieces that really got a huge boost is photorealism, right? Improved, dynamic range, all these other aspects. So just a few things I'd like to say about that. So I pinned a tweet thread where I tried a bunch of different examples. The first and foremost takeaway is like right out of the box, V4 gave you just a bit more of a stylized aesthetic, right? It's something that looked more like a digital painting, concept art, something that you might use a Wacom tablet, Photoshop, or Procreate to create something. Again, still awesome, but not photorealistic. And people were doing all sorts of clever prompting to still get that photorealistic, cinematic realism aesthetic, if you want to call it that, out of Midjourney V4. But oh my God, right out of the box, V5 is much better. So if you look at like even things like if you prompt anything about visual effects, let's say you want to make like this iridescent nuclear explosion, you'll notice this difference where V5 looks a lot more like a multi-layer composite like you might make with stock footage in After Effects or Photoshop or something like that, versus something that looks a little bit more cartoony and painterly. The dynamic range is also phenomenal. And so, dynamic range is nothing but like the difference between like the darkest point of the scene and the brightest point of the scene. And the range there is just much higher now in Midjourney V5. So things just look more true to life when you've got that like wide gamut, that wider dynamic range. And some of the prompts, like even just like, and if somebody else should talk about the differences in prompting, because Linus, maybe you have thoughts about how like the sort of structured prompting approach is moving back to more natural language. But when you prompt scenes and environments, it almost looks like photorealistic scenes in Unreal Engine to me. Like there's no other way to put it. And you don't have to append Unreal Engine, Redshift, anything like that. It's just like taking the same prompts of like, I think I was trying some like solar punk buildings and things like that. You'll notice like the details of the interior of the building through the window, all this like dimensionality, all these depth cues that really give you like perceivable volume and depth in a scene just come out very naturally, right out of the box in the V5 model. And then finally, I'll just say like, as far as like visual effects and even like, styling stuff goes, like playing with scale goes, I was trying a bunch of prompts around like action figures, and it ended up just looking like a Hasbro commercial is the best way to put it. But it naturally picked up like the smaller scale of the objects. It had that sort of tilt shift style bokeh, and it just I think Midjourney V5 is going to be amazing for product photography as well. And then the last note is celebrity rendition. So it's like, what is the stupidest thing I could try with Midjourney V5? I was like, well, why not have Bush and Obama playing like drinking games in the White House lawn? Because, why the hell not? And the results are spectacular. In V4, whenever you'd have like two celebrities, and there's like celebrities are obviously going to be in the training data, right? Like they're widely imaged, they're going to be out there on the internet. V4 would like fuse Obama and Bush together in this like amalgamated hybrid that didn't look good. But yeah, like both of these entities were like the rendition was spectacular, and I think I even tried to get them like smoke a cigar in the White House lounge that just reminded me of the Harold and Kumar 2 movie, if anyone's seen that. And while it didn't exactly look like a Cuban, their like rendition is spot on. So I tried a bunch of other album art cover type things too. Celebrities just look way better as well. So right out of the box, way more photorealism. I'm excited to see how people would like, I don't know, start imagining more cinematic worlds with this. Things like architectural visualization, virtual modeling, anything that benefits from photorealism is going to get a huge boost from V5. So those are some of the observations I have, and feel free to go deeper in the thread that I linked. And I shameless plug to my own YouTube video walking through this in a little bit more detail. So some thoughts on photorealism in Midjourney V5.
Oh yeah, you definitely got a link to that video. That was so in depth too.
I know Linus is going to talk here in a second, but there was two other little things that happened on that live call that I want to point out. One, they announced that they also are releasing Midjourney magazine. So it's actually a monthly subscription magazine where they're going to share art from the community. They're going to share interviews from the community. I think they're going to share some behind the scenes of the company at Midjourney. And for the first month, you can actually get the very first month issue for free. If you go to, I think it's mag.midjourney.com, and you enter the coupon code subscriber, they'll actually give you that first month free of the Midjourney magazine. So that announcement also came with the announcement of Midjourney version 5. And then something that they talked about later in the call, and it was just kind of an offhand like response to a question. Somebody asked if there was going to be a Midjourney API anytime soon. And their response was, send us a DM if you're interested in Midjourney API, meaning that it sounds like they're going to be opening up a Midjourney API so other tools could plug into Midjourney's algorithm pretty soon here. So those were two other little tidbits that came out of this office hours that I wanted to point out. But I'm going to go ahead and pass it over to Linus now.
So, yeah, thanks for adding those points. And I think there's a lot of things to unpack, but I'm just going to focus on two things, like prompting, what changes I've seen, and the Midjourney API, because I have the form. So if anyone wants to fill out the form, feel free to DM me, and I can send you the form link. But anyway, so prompting, I made a recording with AJ. We made it look like it was recorded now, but it was recorded like a week and a half ago. It didn't age well because we went into prompting techniques, and we went into just the thing that didn't work before, which was writing out what we now write out in V5 and get good results. Because in V4, if you wrote out describing the image and you're trying to get what you described, you did not end up getting a good image. And in that podcast that we recorded, I was like explicitly saying like, hey, this is not going to work. And now look at me, 10 days later, that didn't age well. So yeah, there's a very interesting, I think there's a very interesting reason why they went this way. I've spoken to a few of the moderators, and it's like the way that people want to interact with Midjourney is the way that V5 now works. So when most people are new to Midjourney and they try to interact with it, that's what they're naturally are trying to do. They're trying to describe the image using vivid language. So I think the switch to then make sure that prompting works that way is not something that they're going to revert. We're not going to see them making a step change backwards and do prompting like we did in V4, for example. So I think the change is here to stay. I really find it interesting because it reduces the threshold or like it reduces the barrier of entry, because more people are going to be able to just pick up the tool and start writing. The biggest barrier to entry is still Discord, obviously, because it's a weird thing that they have an interface in Discord. I've seen some amazing things. Like, I'm by no means an expert in this. Obviously, I've played around with Midjourney a lot, and a lot of people follow me here on Twitter because I share a lot of Midjourney stuff. But there are so many talented people that are using Midjourney. And I think the verdict is already out on V5. Like, the photorealism is insane. There are like CGI artists that are just like, they don't understand how a computer can generate or how latent space images can generate these type of outputs. And the fact, what we didn't speak about is the aspect ratio, because now you can do pretty much any aspect ratio. You can go crazy with it. You can essentially do a 360 if you want to. That's a huge thing, because you open up the use cases for so much more. I'm not going to plug myself here, but I did compile I think everyone on this space is mentioned in that has written anything about Midjourney is mentioned in my thread. I just tried to spend the whole day today just reading and condense what are the biggest things what's the most signal you can find in the V5 release, basically, and try to just remove all the noise, because there are thousands of threads talking about photorealism, for example. But I think there are some very interesting key takeaways. The V5 pushes the barrier to entry down in a lot of small places, but simultaneously, and also improving the quality. And I think they also mentioned during the call, Matt, correct me if I'm wrong, but V6 is in the making, and Holtz basically said like it will be released in the next 2 months, or that's at least the ambition. So we will, and then he also said like we will have V6 at least before August. So I wouldn't be too attached to V5. It's like it's an alpha release. It's experimental. They've said a lot of changes will happen. But yeah, I mean, it's super exciting. It's probably one of the most exciting things this week outside of LLMs, essentially.
Mike, I have a question about the aspect ratio. Did you notice? Do we know if it's like the resolution? Does it show up? Is it you know how when they just change the resolution? How I think on the landscape view, when it's 2 to 1, it like kind of makes it a little bit distorted. Do you know if that made a difference this time?
They cleaned that up really good. Yeah, it's a lot of things are solved.
Oh, thank you. Batik, did you want to say something?
Yeah, just a few things. Mostly just sort of
Thank
like wild speculation. But I think that's what these, as Bilal pointed out, this is what these chats are for. So just quickly, just touching on the aspect ratio thing. I mean, for sure, this has become something that is definitely possible to improve, whether you're fine tuning these models or training them from scratch. So if you look at some of the work from Novel AI from like almost like 6 months ago, they had some techniques for how you break up your images when they get fed into the training to make them much more robust to sort of like working with different aspect ratios. So that's definitely a thing. But that ties into the next thing here, where I was looking at the quality of the images and the kind of quality improvements that have happened with Midjourney V5, and I've got some possible thoughts on how they did it. I think one of them is that, like, if you look at the trajectory of Midjourney, they are moving towards, much more sort of like training their own models and building their own things and getting really, really, really good at that. And I think, if I were to sort of take a guess, I think it's maybe one of two ways that they got there. One of them is that they just simply built this on a much bigger parameter count model, right? So if you look at something like Stable Diffusion, it's got something like, I don't know, 830 million parameters. And that's one of the reasons you get really bad text rendering, where you get really bad hands, is because it doesn't have the descriptive power to do it. So one possible thing that could have happened is that they built this on something like SDXL, which has something I think in the excess of like 2 billion parameters. So that's one way that they could possibly get there in terms of having that quality. The other way of doing it is much more involved, but totally possible. I mean, they have the technical capacity for it, is to do something like that happened for Stable Diffusion 2, where they went from 512 pix to 768 pix by basically adding an extra layer onto the model that effectively did that upscaling and then added a lot more parameters as well. And that also added a lot of visual quality as well. So I think, overall, I think probably what happened here was that Midjourney did a lot more of this training and development in-house. And one thing I'm really looking forward to is them just sharing the technical details there. I think, whatever they've done has been incredibly great, and I'm really hoping that they can share as much as they can back with the community. It's going to be really cool.
Wait, can I just ask a quick follow-up, and then DSNR? I actually, based on your bio, I think we'd love to hear your thoughts on, like sort of how prompting is changing and so forth. But both, like, what do you think stability should be feeling in this context, right? Like, I think ControlNet, I mean, you have to use LoRa, you got to do a bunch of in-painting, like all these like 5 or 6 things you had to do with like stability to get similar output, you're getting now just with like simple prompts, making it far more accessible.
Yeah.
If you were stability, what would your response be in this situation? Would you be happy that under the hood it's potentially their model, or would you be coming out with something that's similar? Just more speculation, please.
I'd be thrilled. I mean, I think one of the things that is that needs to be resolved here is not resolved, but like there needs to be some sophistication here around sort of like the different use cases. Like, like what are the different ways that people are going to be using these models? What are the different ways that people like, can access them? And I think I love this idea of like, let 1,000 flowers bloom or whatever that phrase is, like lots and lots of people trying different things and trying it out. And we're all like, I love how the community is like the development community is sharing as much as they can with each other. Like nobody's trying to silo too much because they all understand that like, if people share this, then somebody else is going to take this and improve it and share it back with the community, and that vibe is great. And I think stable diffusion, stability in particular, seem to sort of espouse that really strongly. So I'm not at stability. I don't want to speak for them, but I don't know. My guess is that they'd probably be thrilled. I don't know if that answers the question.
Love it.
Yeah,
it absolutely does. It 1,000 flowers bloom.
yeah.
I think let's just leave it at that. I think that's awesome.
Yeah.
All right, DSNR, you wanna jump in here?
Hey guys, it's been a great space. Yeah, this V5 is crazy. Like it's so good at photorealism, but one thing I don't like about it is it's been taking away a lot of my sleep. So yeah, I've just been going crazy with it. So basically, like when I was early on experimenting with GPT based prompting, a lot of the things weren't really getting understood by Midjourney, but with this new version, the format and template is just so much more natural, like Matt said. I mean, I stayed up all night the night it came out and just optimized the photorealistic version that we shipped out, and a lot of it came from inspiration from Matt. So now you can pretty much just type anything and then you can get like a photorealistic full-on prompt, long paragraphs version for that. And something that was built by one of my friends, which is crazy, and I think a really turning point in the space, is he basically made a game using the DSNR templates and images, and he took like stock images and also Midjourney V5 and DSNR images, and he made a game called AI Generated or Not.com, where people kind of go through it and try to figure out which ones are made by AI and which ones were real images. And I'm seeing people that are AI artists failing that test. So that's something that is really something to take notice of, and the fact that it can do that is just insane.
Yeah, Taylor, do you wanna jump in here? I think just to
Yeah.
very
Yeah.
quickly
Can I just
respond to that. Sorry, just respond. I think a lot of people are saying that by the end of this year, we'll reach a place where like real life captures of the world and synthetic captures or synthetic renditions of the world will be truly indistinguishable. Where at least for still imagery, we'll reach a place. I think we're already at that threshold where the visual Turing test, if you will, is something that's like, I mean, we're all just on the cusp of that right now. And so, what an exciting time, Taylor. Yeah, what do you have to say?
Yeah, no, I hope that you can hear me. Can you hear me okay or no?
Yes.
Oh, okay, you can. I had to switch my headphones. No, I just wanted to add that like I would be curious because as a creator who's literally using Midjourney all day, every day, I would love to know who else that's out there that's doing the same thing is still using like V4 versus V5, because I've been playing around a ton with V5. I still default to V4 almost every time because it's that like descriptive language input that's always the barrier for me, whereas I feel like V4 still does very well with like abstraction and sort of interpreting that. So would love to hear anyone's thoughts on that. And then the other thing I wanted to add was, Linus, you mentioned something this week, I think in like your newsletter, about dynamic prompting. And I wonder if that ties in with what you were talking about when it comes to like tagging and tags. So curious if you'd be willing to dive into that a little bit as well.
Yeah, I mean, it still works. We just need to figure out like a nicer way to write it more flowy and less kind of like here's a tag. So you kind of need to add more descriptive words between the tags. I think that's the big difference. Like before, you could be very short. You could go like man, bench, outdoor, sunshine, dynamic lighting. Boom, here we go. We got a nice image. Now you need to be like a man sitting on a bench outdoors in a sunlit environment, and there is green grass, and then we'll get kind of the same output. um, I don't think like there is not that big of a change. It's just that now it's easier to play with the details. That was really difficult before. If you wanted to like add something like a necklace to a character, or you wanted to add something to an animal, or you wanted to add multiple things in a scene, it just got really mixed up. And even if you did multi-prompting, it was really tricky to get it right. And I'm seeing with V5, it's a lot easier to get a lot of these things right. And they also said this is something that also is important. During office hours, they mentioned short prompts do really well. So before we had these like behemoth prompts where people have written 500 words in a long string to generate something. Actually, you don't need 500 words. It does really well if you just say imagine a vase, and you'll get really good images of a vase. You can say imagine a football player, you get really good images of a football player. And then you can take that and start like adding small descriptions to it to make it nicer. I think the big difference is we have to rewire our V4 prompting brain that has been on, this kind of like comma war, word comma word comma word, for the past few months, and just kind of like get back into the play mode. This is the fun part with Midjourney for me. I think it's a very playful environment. It feels like you're just throwing things around. It is a bit of an annoying thing when you kind of feel that you've mastered something for a bit, or like you come very fluent in it, and someone just comes and say, "Hey, we're gonna take your toy away, and now you're gonna have to do it this way instead." So that's my take.
I actually kind of switch back and forth between 4 and 5 right now too. I feel like when I want to get something really, really photorealistic, I'll go and prompt it with version 5. But if I want something like really sort of colorful and imaginative and like crazy color swirls and stuff like that, I go and do that in Midjourney version 4. Like when I'm making my YouTube thumbnails and I want like a really colorful, imaginative background, I'm still prompting that in version 4. I love the fact that Midjourney still lets you prompt with all of the previous versions if you want to. So if you like the way those images came out, you can still do that. But with version 5, you can get so much, like some of the stuff that I've made, like I can't even tell with my own eyes that it's not a photograph with version 5. It's just so crazy to me. But I just love that I can go back and forth, and we don't have to choose if we don't want to.
I was trying to get Kodakai the microphone and we couldn't, but he was DMing me and he said that for the prompting, he still uses both 4 and 5, but he said prompting will converge on the ideal, talking to an ideal conversation partner with full natural language, and sentence is a thought. A slight different sentence is a slightly different thought. Those that are good with conversational language will have the advantage, if that helps.
I 100% agree. And I think we spoke about this last week with precursors. And I think regardless of what's going to happen with all the engines and how they're going to like function, I think a precursor will be the best way to go. So like you just prompt the natural language, and then that can go anywhere to any model, because like currently all models are slightly tuned different and work differently. And to Matt's point, going back and forth V4, V5, 100% same here. I have things that I got like outputs that I need to produce that, for our show on Spotify, for example. The style that we have there, I cannot reproduce that style in V5. It's impossible. I cannot get it. Doesn't matter if I put stylize 1000, it doesn't work. So I need V4 to get that style. So it's not like Midjourney has kept all the versions running, so I can prompt for V2 if I want to, or V3 as well. But so that's a good thing. But I would like to see consolidation on some of the compatibility between the different models, because it's going to get annoying when V6 comes out, and if they change again, or if they like make another enhancement. So maybe the precursor language should come from Midjourney, or should come from someone that's really close, so that like there is an abstraction layer on top of the models, so that we can all prompt in one way.
Dave, go ahead. Did you want to say something?
Yeah, for sure. I appreciate the conversation with everyone, and just want to jump in and hopefully offer some value on kind of some things I found a lot more helpful in 5 versus 4. And just to set the context, I think the majority of what I'm doing is it's all in one story. So I'm developing like an entire story in one fictional world. So I think there's sometimes when 5, like for example, 4 really struggled with 2 character interactions, like particularly like emotional interactions, like when you're trying to like get like one person who looks like this and one person who looks like this. They could be like in my like sci-fi where they're completely different like textures, tones and stuff. Like 3 humans in one room is very different than like 1 human and 1 like bird, you know what I mean, or like 1 like fictional character. So 4 really struggled to do 2 character interactions that have kind of like genuine emotional interactions, whereas 5 does a really good job with that. And I think I'm not a techie at all, and I don't know what happened on the back end, but like I made a picture of like, I don't know, like a woman consoling her dragon pet, and it was like perfect. Like in 4, it was just brutal because it merged the properties. So that's a lot better in 5. And then 4 also I've noticed is that 4 and below was really good with real life things. It could sample off like, I think there's so many gorgeous like portraits of like a woman in New York City like in her 80s, right? And it looks exactly like that, but fictional things it struggled with a little bit to make it not super cartoony or kind of like clunky. And so I think that's what 5 has done really well. And a trick that I found that's been really helpful is, like Matt said, is using like the kind of abstract emergent, like thinking out of the box, maybe like plug in from ChatGPT to get ideas generated, getting that in 4 and then switching to 5 and copy pasting that picture in and then using 5 to kind of enhance that even more has been super helpful. I think that's been like a really cool thing that I found has been really, really useful. And I just, not that I was posting it for this, but I just worked on a bunch of stuff from 4 that was like, it's kind of where I want it to be, but it's not awesome. I took 4s, copy pasted them into Discord, used a similar prompt that was a long form description on the same exact 4 picture in 5, and it came out like stunning. But those are all fictional things that I think it struggles to, get. How many friggin' like examples of things going to get tested on versus a bajillion humans in the world that can get, sample data off of. So yeah, that's just a couple things I wanted to share. And then I also think that one thing I'm still struggling with is keeping the same theme of something in 5. So when you do these long form descriptions in 5, you can say this really long, stunning description, but in 4, the keywords that were triggering the outputs, I find that using the same keywords over and over in 4 with commas seem to be very, very helpful to keep the same theme of a certain type of character or scenery or art, where I think is, even with chaos being controlled, right? We're doing seeds and stuff. It was much better at doing the same exact thing over and over. So I was able to create like 5 different, I would say 5 different characters in the same, like, I guess like group, right? The same group of like people, right? And versus like in 5 with long form descriptions, like I can't reproduce that over and over and over again. So I go back to 4 sometimes because there's certain keywords that really hit the nail on the head for what comes out the other side. And so, yeah, those are just, I spent a lot of time last night doing this and probably will this weekend and save people some time, hopefully.
Dave, I think just to echo all the stuff you said, really good, like crisp difference.
Did we lose him?
Did I rug there? Sorry.
Yeah, we lost Philwell there. I don't know what happened to his mic.
You know what? Let me say, because
Oh,
Kodakai was texting me something about, or we were DMing, and he was saying about the realism. I apologize if this is repeating something you just said. Realism is easy to do. The artist will gravitate to realism with a slant, or romantic realism, or realism and some other aesthetic. And he agrees with Dave about the characters interacting with emotions. That's bad in version 4. Sorry.
I'll try to find an example and pin it up of one that came out really cool that like you can really feel the context emotion.
Thank you.
Sorry, I'm back as well. I hit my screen time limit for Twitter for the day, so. So I was just gonna say, like, the cloud of keywords is so useful. Like just comma separated keywords. If you want to do that background. Sort of what Matt was saying, and keeping the consistent theme and style. But that's exactly why I think, when I tried to do Obama and Bush playing like drinking games, it would fuse them together in V4 and V5. It is much better at figuring out those spatial relationships, which is why I guess natural language is important now, where you can describe sort of the context of the scene and the entities that are within the scene using natural language. And just it picks that stuff up way, way better. So it's going to be exciting. I guess you can compose more complex scenes and get more stylism and like consistency with V4. But I'm sure people will figure out how to do that with V5 as well. So it'll be exciting to see where that goes. Maybe that's why prompt weighting, like keyword weighting, sort of got introduced back in as an important thing. I don't know if anyone has thoughts on that.
Yeah, no, I definitely, sorry, Linus, I'll just jump in real quick, but I definitely, even with weighting and even with like brackets and like it really struggled to separate 2 people with 2 distinctly different properties. Like it was very hard to get different ethnicities in the same picture of like, a white male and a Latino female, and it would blur people. And then like in my world, which is like the sci-fi kind of stuff, it would be like, here's a knight with like a zombie, and it would just make a knight zombie on both sides. You know what I mean? It wouldn't like distinguish between the 2. And maybe I'm just a noob with weighting prompts and like brackets and stuff, and I can't quite prompt it well. But now in the 5, when I say like, a blah 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 standing next to a blah blah blah. You know, it comes out actually pretty close the entire time, and yeah, get you halfway there, which is cool.
I think for that, Dave, multi-prompting has been the way to solve it in V4. So multi-prompting is like separating two or multiple parts of your prompt with two colons, so that you have like you don't use it for weighting, but you basically just give it one prompt. Could be like white male standing on the beach, and then you do two colons, and then you do Latina woman standing on the beach, and then that works really well. Like usually, it works okay, 80%, 75% of the times. But in V5, they really improved on this, and they kind of like made it so that you don't really need to do multi-prompting for that anymore. But you can still do it, and you can still have very fine grain control if you're deciding to do multi-prompting.
Balti, go ahead.
Yeah, I just wanted to speak briefly to this common issue that comes up about getting consistent characters or consistent scenes or some sort of consistency across multiple generations, right? And I think it just speaks to the underlying thing here that these models are probabilistic, right? And what we're doing is that we can give them hints and we can say, I really want you to do this, but getting it to exactly do that is really hard. And I think getting it to sort of be exactly repeatable is something that is always going to be slightly out of reach, just simply because of the underlying nature of the models that are there. But in terms of steering it in the right direction, I guess I just want to give a little bit of a shout out to a particular technique, which is sort of textual inversions. And textual inversions, under the hood, what they really are they're collections of prompts, what it really comes down to, right? So what textual inversions are is that they're collections of tokens, like, so, the words that you use for the prompts, and they're grouped together and they're given a weight, right? And it basically says, what I want you to do is that I really want you to do this. Or if you use a textual inversion in a negative prompt, it's like, I really don't want you to do this. And they are a very powerful technique that works at the front end of the mechanism, like of image generation, to really sort of like steer it in a particular direction. So this kind of thing that you're doing where you're grouping chunks of your prompt together and you're trying to give it weights can be achieved using textual inversion. So if you're keen on getting in under the hood there's one particular plugin I'd recommend for the automatic 11 repo called Embedding Inspector. And you can use that to actually group together words in the prompt and generate, for example, the example they use is like an astro cat, right? So it's a combination of an astronaut and a cat, and rather than training it with images, you actually train it with the tokens themselves, right? So you can train, you can generate an embedding just using your prompt, and that's a great way of getting some of that consistency. But like I said, it's always going to be a little bit out of reach, and I think that's going to be another interesting UX thing that's going to be challenging and interesting to solve over the next year or so. That's it for me.
I've written a whole I've written a whole guide on how to do consistent characters in Midjourney. So
fantastic.
Yeah, if anyone's interested, I can share that.
Cool.
Something I think is really interesting is I've seen on Twitter some people are making like rhinos in suits and stuff, and I feel like now you can imagine things that are imaginary but make them feel like they're in real life. I haven't experimented too much in that, but if anyone has tried that one, I'm curious to see like how that process has been.
Yeah, I would say 95% of the stuff that I'm making in the last 3 months is all fictional, made up, like combinations of weird stuff, and so it's amazing. It's like it's insane. Like I've had the idea for this in my head for 10 years, but I have two left hands and couldn't like paint with my teeth if I tried. So I've never had a way to get it out. And then finally, when I learned like about Midjourney and prompting, I was like, oh no, like the floodgates completely open to get it all into paper. You know what I mean? So yeah, it does incredible with fictional creations of melding and combinations between like seeds and blending and different stuff. Like you can get pretty much what's in your head out there eventually in some way, shape, or form.
See, Christian, did you have something? Christian.
Oh yeah, g'day.
Yes,
I just thought that the way that this whole thing is developed reminds me a lot of the really old text-based games where you could type like go over, inspect, look at, and you sort of had to either have read the manual or know what you're doing before you could tell it what commands to do. But then the later generation of like ScumVM games like the LucasArts Day of the Tentacle, Monkey Island, it gave you like little like hints down the bottom, or like graphical things of almost like guide rails of what you could do. And then further on, like into the more modern sort of Street Fighter games, you could sort of button mash and hopefully win and do cool moves. But if you could memorize the right types of moves all together, you could actually come up with the combos all in one and do almost like really quite extreme movements. And it just reminds me in the way that Midjourney and the prompting in these guides, where you say like background, object, description is very practiced and very good, but it's also like we're almost at the very start of the old style fashion games, and then eventually it'll hopefully become more user friendly as things move on. But I just think it's really exciting thing to be part of, and to see it develop like right from the start is just really cool.
Thank you. Billawall, did you have something you wanted to say? Thank you so much, Christian. I appreciate that. And I apologize. I was looking around because I lost Josh. I was trying to get in the mic. But Billawall, you wanted to add to the prompts?
I think I've added what I wanted to earlier. I just be curious. Let people keep going on Midjourney V4. Let's hear some more.
Okay, who was up next? Dave?
Midjourney 4, I think, is still the best thing for abstract, like very creative, imaginative, like interpretations of stuff, like, using either like very unique keywords or emojis or prompts or things like that. Like I find that's like, if you just want to go in and get like the craziest looking, like really extravagant, like 5D artistic interpretations, it's still the best for that over 5. Like I didn't have like a lot of success. I'm also not the best with that kind of stuff, so that could be an N of 1 for me. But yeah, I found that 4 is the best for like the open, completely imaginative, like abstract kind of stuff. Personally, sounds like Matt and his thumbnails are clearly doing that too.
I think one thing that sort of
one question I was actually going to ask you, Matt, is in the office hour, like, so the long-term goal for Midjourney is about making sort of interactive 3D experiences or something like that, right? Did they perhaps talk about that in the office hour, how this like ladders up towards that? Because again, like the photorealism is heading in that direction. There's clearly more dimensionality, a little bit more spatial awareness in the prompting. I'd be curious if like there was any explicit talk or any speculation folks have on like what's Midjourney's, like, is it like, how does this all ladder up to interactive?
I don't remember them actually saying much about that specifically on the call. Maybe if Linus remembers them saying something about it, but I don't remember that actually coming up as, a Q&A or something that they talked about. But what I do know is, Linus was correct. Somebody did come up on a Q&A and say, do you think we'll see a version 6 before August? And then Jack from Midjourney said, I think we'll see a version 6 within the next 2 months. So it sounds like they're going to be ramping up versions at a very rapid pace, and we're going to just see new iterations of Midjourney really, really quickly. So, just based on that information, I don't think what you're saying is too far off. But one thing I was going to say that sort of excites me about Midjourney version 5 is the fact that it is using more of the natural language for the input that you're giving. And at the same time, they're opening up the API for it. So this to me is really exciting, because I'm thinking that we're going to see a lot of people take, GPT-4 APIs and the Midjourney API and tie them together and find some really, really creative words or really creative ways for GPT-4 to create really interesting prompts and just automatically inject them into Midjourney and get some really, really cool images out of it. And so, I think that the implications of this API getting released soon is something that I don't know if we've really spoken into enough, because I actually think that's a pretty damn big deal. Midjourney's been pretty tight with their APIs and who they give access to. I know earlier somebody was mentioning especially with stability AI, there's like this feel of openness and sharing, and if we put this out into the world, then these other companies can also get access to the code and then use it to build on top of. In Midjourney up until now has been very sort of walled garden, very closed off of like, this is our technology. We're not really sharing it with anybody else. This is our proprietary models. And I think them releasing an API is kind of one step closer to them going, okay, now we're going to let other people play with this a little bit. Now we're going to let other people iterate off of this a little bit. And I think that in of itself is pretty exciting as well, that I think there's some big implications down the line of what's going to be built off the back of Midjourney pretty soon.
Fun times ahead. All right, so I think I'll be moderating the last 15 minutes here, I guess. All right, so we've wrapped up all the topics for today. So, people, if you joined a little bit later in the session today, feel free to check out the recording. We covered everything from GPT-4, which clearly, was the topic of the week, but also what Google and Microsoft are doing in the AI space, infusing AI into products that we use on an everyday basis. And of course, we had a massive artistic nerd session, I don't know if that's a word, about Midjourney, V5, V4, all the things in between. So we've got, let's say, like 14 minutes and change of time left here. So let's do some open topics. Anything else, miscellaneous news folks would like to hit on before we wrap up for the week? Yeah, Dave, go for it.
Yeah, I mean, I think one that came up, there was a space I was in with a group about, like, there's an IP lawyer who was in there talking about just things around NFTs, copyright law, images, all that kind of stuff. And it's just important to know there's like an active, she couldn't talk about it, but there's an active like lawsuit discussion about going on with like Midjourney and a couple other places, Getty Images and other. And so like, I'm really hoping that we get some clarity on what can be used, commercial rights, like, can you use it, can you not? But she was saying it's like literally active right now, and hopefully it's going to be moving along pretty quickly. So I just thought that was a good little note that like at least it's happening. They're talking about all these things pretty in depth, and it's as clear as mud, but there's actually something happening on it, which is good.
To just add to that, I think the active lawsuit, I think that's everyone knows about, is against Stability AI, and the fine print of the lawsuits is that's the most important thing. And none of these models are actually using images. Just to get that clear, they are using latent space data derivatives of the original images, and this is why it's so complicated. And latent space images are noise. So imagine just a noise field that's a derivative of an original image. And when we try to recreate the original image, we're creating a derivative of the latent space image, which is essentially like a derivative of the derivative. I think this is going to be super interesting, and it's going to like set a like it's going to be whatever happens in that courtroom. Yeah, it's going to set precedent for whatever's going to happen next. But the fine print of that is that where it's going to be important to see what happens.
Anyone want to talk about Claude? I feel bad for so many announcements happened this week, and then like GPT-4 popped up. It's like those memes of like the bigger circles. Like these bigger circles just keep sucking out all the air from the conversation.
We've played with Claude, and we're adding it to bedtime stories. So
that's what's up. Yeah, do you want to talk more about that?
Claude is fucking great. It's fast. We've been seeing better results than with GPT 3.5. Like way better results. So yeah, I can't say much more now, but we will make an announcement to the people that are tech interested. We will probably be running both GPT 3.5 Turbo and Claude. Yeah, maybe Instant as well. We've done some tests, but initial findings is that we can generate better stories at a fraction of the time.
Love it. Maybe two other miscellaneous topics. I think, Matt, we didn't think we'd get to this, but I guess we have a little bit of time. Do you want to talk about NVIDIA's Canvas tool and then perhaps Stability's Reimagine tool?
Yeah, so Stability AI, they just released a tool called Reimagine, which, it's a tool where you can basically upload an image and then it will just try to recreate that image in similar other ways. To be honest, I saw the announcement, but I haven't gotten it and played with it myself yet. I mean, this week there's been a few things on my plate. I've been trying to keep up with all the news and make content about all this stuff. So Reimagine is one that I haven't played with, but Stability just announced today that came out. And then Emad, also from the CEO and founder of Stability AI, mentioned that there's more announcements coming from Stability next week as well. So there's more excitement to come next week. GTC, the NVIDIA conference about AI and metaverse, that's happening next week. We can probably expect a couple of new announcements coming out of that as well. And then what was the other thing? The NVIDIA Canvas. It's like an AI art tool, but it actually creates in layers. So you can export your art in layers, pull it into Photoshop, have separate layers, and you kind of paint with actual material, right? You can actually paint with clouds and grass and water and things like that. So it's this this new kind of painting canvas tool that you can use, and it actually creates layers that can be exported into PSD files and things like that to be pulled into Photoshop or Illustrator or any of those kinds of tools. So that's kind of the high level of those. But if I'm being totally honest, I have not gotten in and used either one of them myself. I've only read the announcements about them.
Sounds like everyone on stage is going to have very little sleep just at this rate. Again, like going back to Imad's tweet, it's like, yo, like everyone's like, can we please just get the weekend off? No more new stuff, you know, like just a little bit of rest and recuperation might be needed. Encrypted Kingdom. Do you want to add something here?
Sure. I would like to ask a question, if that's okay.
Sure, go for it.
Related to regulation, you know, we all got to have sort of, there has to exist this authority structure in society that kind of determines. I'm curious, in this process of all of this coming out, especially in light of Microsoft Word adding that Copilot, and how that might impact academia, and then also in the realm of Midjourney being so advanced in its design capabilities. Do we know, is there a centralized, I guess, authority that's going to ultimately seek to regulate, or is this currently like just in process and it's kind of evolving over time? I'm curious. Does anybody know that?
I guess we needed to have a regulation question come in at the last minute here. That's a tough one. I don't know if there are any lawyers on the stage, but anyone want to pontificate on that one? I think like my only comment here would be policy and institutional framework is going to have an exceedingly difficult time keeping up with the pace of this type of development. We touched on this a little bit earlier, where, you know, just like the trajectory that OpenAI has taken from this like open source approach to progressively clamping down and putting in like reasonable trust and safety measures is almost like necessary. And yet we can't know the full implications of these models going out in the wild. And so with so many unknowns, I just wonder, how would you regulate this? You know, it's like either you can treat this like nuclear, in which case you're like putting surveillance on every goddamn device, or you can treat this as like complete open source on the other end of the spectrum. And the answer is somewhere in the middle. I just don't know what the shape of that looks like. You know, maybe we can ask GPT-4. I don't know if others have thought. Both, you got your hand up. You're probably thinking about this.
Yeah, there was just very briefly, there was a very confusing ruling just from a couple of days ago from, it wasn't ruling, so it was guidance from the US Copyright Office, basically saying that output from generative AI in general, right? So whether it's text or images or whatever, can't be copyrighted. And I'd say, you know, based on some of the discussion that's happened around this, if you look at sort of like, I think this also got discussed on the Verge podcast, I think just a couple of days ago as well. I think the general consensus here is that this is going to take a really long time to work out, and there's just going to be a trickle of rulings basically over the next 10 years. It's going to take a long, long, long time. So I think it's going to be a bit of a bumpy road for us to get there. We will get there, but it's going to take a while, I think.
Yeah. Any other thoughts on that very difficult, I think, question? It's going to be the central one and becomes, I don't know, exceedingly more important as AI infuses itself to various, you know, different, like all sorts of different verticals, right?
For real, yeah.
I think one thing to compare it to is like if a photographer can, I think maybe this was said during the office hours, but maybe if a photographer can snap a photo at a push of a button and that photo is instantly copyrightable, and it's their asset, I think using an AI that's far more complicated to come up with an end result should probably be treated the same way. That's just my opinion, but I think we'll see what happens. But I think it's interesting to make that analogy. Like, if a photographer can snap a photo of anything and it's theirs, commercially theirs, why shouldn't I be able to like write something or image prompt something and it should be mine? Like, I don't see the big difference there. I actually think the photographer is the one that probably shouldn't own the rights, to be honest.
I think there's a fine line too. It's kind of like where does the line get drawn? I feel like there's going to always be this constant cat and mouse game going on. If you can't copyright text output and you can't copyright image output, isn't it just going to be a game of companies trying to figure out how to make it less detectable? I know they're talking about doing watermarks and text generation, but then there's tools that are coming out that are trying to make it so that you can't tell that it's text generation. And same with the images. Like, I don't know if there's any super reliable tool out there that can accurately tell you if something was generated with AI or not. I remember there was a story in Reddit of somebody that actually posted an image that they created themselves, and that person got kicked out of the subreddit because they said it looked too much like AI generated art. Like, I feel like there's just going to be this ongoing cat and mouse game that the regulators are going to constantly be trying to keep up with. And I'm curious if it's worth the effort for the regulators. And I just have opinions. I don't know the legal implications of all of this, but what I just see is a never ending cat and mouse game of regulators trying to keep up with the technology. And if I know anything about governments, they don't always have the most technologically advanced people at the helm. If we remember them asking how Facebook made money, that's the type of people we have running the country right now. So I see this constant cat and mouse game, and I don't know how that ends.
I think you're right too, because when Google they changed when they were checking for AI in the writing, and a lot of people, articles that they wrote that weren't AI generated, they were getting hit saying that they were audited, and they found that they used AI, and it's been going on for several months. And it's just kind of like, well, if you write a certain way, it makes it look like it's AI written. So I think that it might be, yeah, it's going to be wild, because all of this is just kind of going to go back and forth. Somebody a few weeks ago said that they believe eventually it'll collapse, because all the different jurisdictions, they can't keep coming up with these same exact rulings. Every situation is different. So it's going to, it will overwhelm. The lawsuits will end up overwhelming and kind of breaking the system. But I guess it depends too on the corporations like Microsoft and Google, going ahead and like wiping out the startups with if they were going to incorporate it into their suites.
Yeah, Robert Scoble, I think it was him who made the point on a space a few weeks ago, is when they basically ruled that AI art couldn't be copyrighted. He was talking about, okay, well, where do we draw the line? Because most modern digital cameras have AI built into them, right? So if that image was assisted with AI and the images that we're creating was assisted with AI, does that mean photographs that were assisted with AI can't be copyrighted as well because AI helped it out? I mean, there's just such a fine line that, I don't know where that line gets drawn. And I just think it's going to get fuzzier and fuzzier over time.
I think what also makes that complicated is the fact that we talked about multimodality earlier, like now it's okay, sure, like complex text prompts are awesome, but if you're using things like ControlNet or any kind of image input to GPT-4 to, give much clearer artistic intent to what you're trying to do, at some point that becomes no different than, using a 3D application like Maya or something like that, right? And if the problem is like some contaminated data in the data set, I mean, like, that's going to be an interesting problem to solve. I mean, both, like, I think in the past you mentioned just the whole problem of finding duplicates in like Lion 5B, and like really figuring out how to filter down those data sets is a challenge. But surely the case can also be made that, this ain't like people naively typing in like dope looking car and, like trying to patent that. People are being far more sophisticated in the way they prompt these, generative models to get their artistic intent on the medium of choice, whether that's photos, text, and increasingly things like video too. So,
I mean, given the really long sort of like time scale that regulators have, another thing they can do is they can just wait, right? They can just wait to see how this all pans out, right, before they engage. And I know it's sort of like hard to wrap a head around when we're all in such like a fast-paced environment. So I think it's also a case of like, mismatched timescales that also make this debate sort of like really hard to get our heads around.
By the way, I will add we're just talking here in the DMs here. So since we've got quite an audience today, we've got 268 people. Hello, everybody. We're gonna just keep this ball rolling and just see how far we can take the snowball. So all bets are off on the agenda. We've already exhausted that agenda, but this is a broad topic, and there were a lot of philosophical topics brought up earlier. So as people are cracking open their beverages of choice, feel free to bring back in that philosophical conversation as well.
So we do have questions, though. Have we looked at some of the questions that people asked?
Yeah, that's a good point. Let me get into the chat and
so
see.
so actually, I wanted to like Amar had a great question. Did we touch on that? So the question is, do people know of any text to 3D apps out there that someone can sign up and use? I think Luma does, but do they have a wait list? Making a game, and I would love to use AI generated 3D models, music backgrounds, skyboxes. So any tools or suggestions are welcome. Anyone able to speak to that? Matt, have you seen anything?
I would suggest going to futuretools.io and check
So I haven't seen anything that does text to 3D art straight up yet. There is a tool out there called KDEM, KAEDIM, and that's a tool where you plug in a prompt and they will make a 3D model based on the prompt, but then they also have people, 3D like sculptors behind the scenes there that then refine the prompt and send it back to you. I also came across a couple of Google collabs out there that will take a 2D image and convert that into a 3D image. I've played around with that a little bit. They're Google collab links, so it's hard to just share a URL with everybody on the call right now. But I have seen some Google collabs out there where you can take a 2D image, it will convert it into a 3D image. And I've played around with that a little bit, where I've generated somebody standing in a T pose in Midjourney or Stable Diffusion. I've pulled it into this Google collab. The Google collab would then turn it into an actual 3D image. And then from that 3D image, I've put it into something like Mixamo, where I've animated the character that I've made in Midjourney. So if you get creative and you start, duct taping a few of these tools together, it is possible. And then now even Leonardo has the 3D text to 3D texturing that they're rolling out. So once you even make your 3D model and you get it sort of animated or whatever, you can actually add textures to it. We'll try to figure out what's in the image. And Blender also has a plugin that you could add to Blender that will add texture to any 3D image using AI now, where you can go into Blender and draw an image. I saw a video on YouTube the other day where somebody was doing this. They drew a picture of like a treasure chest inside of Blender, like a 3D render of it, and then they pressed a button that said draw, put this in the texture of a treasure chest, and then it applied the treasure chest texture to it, and it conformed to the 3D model. So there's stuff out there where if you duct tape it all together, I mean, maybe Fidgetal, who's on the call, that they have workflows that you tie a bunch of tools together. Maybe they might have a better answer on this, but I have seen ways to do it by tying a bunch of tools together, just nothing that does it all in one yet.
Yes, that is something that we're ultimately working towards. Right now, the only thing that we can do is generate UV textures. But so far, you're right. Like, it's all about just sort of like navigating all the different tools. So far, we do not have like a usable workflow to work with 3D textures and objects. But that's definitely on the roadmap, 100%.
Yeah, there would two things on the Fidgetal side that you should play with. Just to that question is they've got the 360 panorama module in there. That's similar to Blockade Labs. Blockade Labs is pretty cool if you just want to play with something quickly and choose a couple of different styles and just prompt like a skybox. Then you could run that through something like Midas to just infer depth, and then you could put that like as a displacement map in Unity. So that'll give you at least your sort of environmental context. There's also, I think y'all have Icon, the 3D human for photo in Fidgetal as well. That's pretty cool. I think there's a couple other papers out there. But as Matt said, it is like very much like duct tape the things together versus one single thing. So the Icon thing is you can give it a photo. So let's say you could prompt a character in Midjourney, create a 2D photo. then run that through Icon, and then you'll get a full 360 model, but it'll be untextured. So then you could go perhaps project the texture from Midjourney on it, and then, you know, go into a painting tool. You could do this even in Blender itself, which is free and open source, and sort of fill in the back, or, you know, make a couple other generations and essentially like project those onto the 3D model. So Luma is the only one that I've seen which does basically like the Dream Fusion approach, and produces reasonable results. I am excited to see how text to 3D evolves, but you can already, you know, kit bash or pull a bunch of these pieces together.
Yeah, and I want to add to the responses that Amar got in the chat. So Keith Hayden, he recommended Boomy. I think we mentioned that, BOOMY.com. And then Stern is recommending Blockade Labs for generating skyboxes. So I guess that kind of summarizes that question. Tuco had another question. I'm not sure if we touched on this. It's actually directed to me or anyone else. I don't feel inclined to answer. So if anyone else wants to, it's from the quote that I have in my bio, which essentially is, AI won't take jobs from humans, but humans with AI will take jobs from those who don't use AI. My take, I just give my take, and I want someone else to kind of like just chime in on that. But my take is this: we are going to a paradigm shift that we haven't seen, I think, since the birth of the internet, or since the birth of, like, after the .com crash. And we're going through this paradigm shift, and this time around, changes are not measured in years or months. We're measuring change by days, until things settle down. And I think that's why my sole mission is essentially to get as many people as possible to know about these tools and use these tools, to not get left behind, because I don't want there to be a big divide between the people that can use these tools and the people that have never heard of them. That's my take on that. If anyone else has something to add, I would be happy to hear what you think.
Well, I'm trying to get a couple of mics out, but
I can fill some dead space. But I think
thank you.
The EMAD, the Stability founder, had a really amazing interview with Raoul Paul on like how many different verticals and things are going to be disrupted by everything, right? And for those that don't know, I think he actually has a crazy background with his son has autism, and they were using AI to help generate and sift through medical research to find the best treatments and stuff like that. And that was the origin of some of these things. But he really expanded upon like just the magnitude of impact that this technology and this like whole movement will have. Like they were just talking about things with like $1 trillion market caps, and like how 5G was $1 trillion market cap and had so much reach. And this is like 100-fold or 1,000-fold times more epic in his mind and transformative than some of those inventions, which was hard for me to wrap my head around. But I didn't want to bring it up before because it's token gated, but I did pin a tweet up that is like a little clip like that they were talking about it. It's really a fascinating listen if anybody has access to it.
Anything EMAD puts out is amazing. He's got an interview, the one with Raoul Paul is really good, and then he's got another one with Peter Diamandis that's really good on YouTube. Highly recommend everybody interested in generative AI at all listen to those, because he sees the future better than anybody else.
Matt, are you ever shocked with how casually he talks about like the most epic changes of all time? He's just like, yeah, it'll be 1 trillion-fold difference than what we experience now, and it'll be fun. I was like, all right, yeah, man, say it with some passion.
Oh yeah, it blows my mind every time I hear him. It's just anytime I see something come out with him, I instant go watch. He's somebody that I would love to do like a live stream and interview him on my channel sometime soon. He's on my wish list for sure.
It's always so nonchalant. Y'all are so right. I think the Peter Diamandis interview was really good. I listened to that one recently. Andy, you got something to add to this spicy convo?
Yeah, my point is regarding the job replacements and such. I roll with the Yang Gang, which he's opening a NFTLA party. But the UBI makes sense not only because the past 50 years we've already seen a massive increase in American productivity, but the differential from the average CEO to average worker has gone from like 30x to 300x. So we're going to be valuing things very highly, and AI will replace jobs. Why wouldn't it? Of course. and robotics, etc., and everything moving forward. Um, so yeah, I mean, we're going to be so productive that we're going to actually start acting like a spaceship Earth together and paying people just to exist, and they can go be poets and whatever as it should be. I mean, there's enough resources to do it now. You know, ask Buckminster Fuller or Bernie Sanders. Or, you know, they know. So that's it.
Yeah, it's always going to be a fine line between what we're doing here and creativity. But go ahead, Dave.
Yeah, this actually links into is interesting that Raoul Paul was saying that he sees the AI movement combining and interacting with blockchain technology as one of like the most efficient ways to increase human creativity because it allows you to automate the mundane, repetitive tasks that maybe you don't want to do or aren't great at doing, but then spend more of your bandwidth in the things that only a human can do, which is creativity, which is imagination, which is true nuanced context and stuff like that. And so I thought it was fascinating because Raoul Paul was saying like this will actually be one of the most deflationary events for us to get more productivity and grow the economy because people who are knowledge workers, we can summarize that, but then use humans for what they're amazing at, which is just the really abstract thinking, the creativity, the stunning amount. And I thought that was cool because I agree that it will replace a bunch of jobs or sections of jobs, but the people that can learn AI will become superhuman versions of their job, right? Like the person who is great at coding and then knows how to code and then uses ChatGPT as an addition and doesn't blindly trust ChatGPT to make an entire website, those are the people that Amazon and Microsoft will want to work for because everybody will elevate their game of efficiency. So I think like there's a lens in which you view it at, which is doom and gloom and we're all going away, or like we can use these and learn these tools to be 2.0 versions of the best parts of ourselves, which is like, you know, creativity and thinking and all that kind of stuff. That's how I view it. I view it as people who take the time to learn the tools, keep up, work with each other, share information, and have a skill set behind it already. They're going to really excel quite a bit. You know, there's some 13-year-old probably in Texas coding a website that's going to take over like all of our best things that we have now, you know?
Yeah, there's an interesting point to be made here about, about the types of jobs that'll get replaced, right? Like clearly robotics is hard. Maybe I think Elon might come out with his Tesla bot that can like solve the plumbing problem. But right now, it's funny how creativity was the thing that everyone thought would be this like untouched bastion of peak human excellence. And that's clearly not the case. I mean, a lot of creativity, can be derived from these like rather simplistic approaches to AI. When things get far more sophisticated, it remains to be seen what happens. But I will say it feels like it's like a at conversation like that we're all sort of contributing to in a way. Like there's a world in which we could realize the Wall-E future, if you will, or we can realize the like solar punk utopia. And I think we all have to work towards pushing things in the point of like the solar punk utopia. To go back to like the Greg Brockman talk we were talking about earlier when we were talking about GPT-4, it's like one of the key points that just got brought up that sometimes economic incentives may not align with social good. And I think it's like walking the edge of a sword. It's this really fine line that you have to end up walking, and I think it's a deliberate one. And so really easy ways to see how this can turn into Black Mirror. I think science fiction has done a really good job of outlining both the utopian and dystopian possibilities here. So something for us to think about as we go into our Friday. Yeah, Phil, you got your hand up? You want to jump in here?
Phil, go.
Yeah. Oh, sorry. It took forever to get the mic. I don't know. My shit keeps failing, so I'm here now.
It is Twitter,
Yeah,
got a nimble
I know.
team.
It stays me in like on mic for like 1 minute, and then I'm kicked out, and I'm like, crap. Okay, I'm out, I guess. So just say hi to everyone. Really, really great to see just how big these spaces are getting. A big congrats to Taylor and Heather. Just it's really fun to see, especially two women leading those spaces. I just love to see it. With that out of the way, I wanted to like touch on two things. Like first of all, we talked about copyright a bit earlier, and one interesting thing I think to like think about when we go forward for these things. For instance, the U.S. What was happening? I forgot. I think it's Chris. Her name. I keep forgetting her name, but she was the one who challenged and got one of the first decisions around AI generated work. And there's two very interesting things happening regarding the legal approaches. Not to get too technical, but like in the U.S., the lines and how to figure out how to copyright stuff was really on the work product. So that was the big issue of like, as we talked earlier, like where to draw the line. And I think that approach will be difficult and will create a lot of issues because you'll end up in difficult decisions of drawing that line and potentially impacted other types of decisions that affect your product. So I think this can be big and difficult real fast. Well, for instance, here I'm Canadian. In Canada, the AI copyright lies upon the owner itself. So, for instance, in copyright law for Canada, the main obstacle for copyrighting anything with AI stuff was the fact that it is written in the law that only a a natural person who can exercise skill and judgment can own a copyrighted work. And so that language was preventing anything made with AI because it would had to be listed as a co-owner of said work. But in 2021, that actually happened. It was in December 2021 that someone was able to register an AI assisted work, and since then the Canadian government has been going on with public consultation on how to move forward with these things because the Internet of Things had similar problems in terms of how to basically have the ability to copyright stuff for these companies because, well, a lot of their functioning was AI. So in Canada, I think things can move forward a bit more rapidly because if you just change the language of ownership, well, your problem is solved. Because if you include machines to be able to own things, it makes it a lot easier. So that's, I think, one thing that if the rest of the world can look at on not focusing on the product itself, because drawing the line is quite impossible to be, I think, in my opinion. So that was one thing. The other thing for like the thing from the bio of Linus, well, the image on Linus that I think we talked about that in a few conversations, me and him, same with Nick. And I think for me as a photographer and filmmaker first before I was involved in AI stuff, I really believe, perhaps harshly, that AI will weed out the uninteresting and unoriginal work. Because if an AI with a, like we said, rather simple approach can replicate some of work, let's say, because even if you take like the greats, if you take Starry Night, if you take Mona Lisa or whatever, and if you ask the AI to just replicate that and then you want to say that you made this, well, no, you didn't. So people who are going with an approach that is just frankly not good or unoriginal will get just booted out. And I think that the people who have the best chance of making great stuff will see AI tools as truly an opportunity and an amazing way to just move forward. Like Matt and Bilal, oh my god, I can't say your name. I'm very sorry for that. Have said that like it just moves forward just much faster. And I think to finish before I take the whole mic as usual, um, I just want to put on the UBI stuff of like again in Canada there was a lot of successful short programs testing UBI, and it's a it's for me, I'm such a fan. I've worked in politics and it's been one of the big things I've been trying to do because it's just natural. Like we've increased the productive levels of humans by tremendous levels, and the salaries and wages have not.
Okay.
And there's no
Phil,
excuse.
Phil. I think that we just need to rate it in. We've been going for
Yeah.
over 2 hours, so thank you for filling out on the UB stuff. And I'm a big UB fan as well, given the fact that I'm Swedish and I pay like 60% in tax, and I really believe in UB in the long term. Should we get back to the questions from the chat? Thank you, Phil, for being here today as well. Can we get back to the questions that we
I
had
put
in the
that
chat?
collab. Somebody had asked about the website that Matt had mentioned a little while ago, and I put that in there, and I put that into the chat. And somebody was asking about fashion. Let me see. Any other questions here? I don't know
Yeah,
if we
I got
were.
a question I could pull on here. So, Linus, appreciate you bringing things back, and Phil, appreciate your perspectives, especially about if the marginal cost of content creation is to zero. I think that's going to be like the thoroughly uninteresting or average content, and people are going to have to be far more creative to sort of cut through the noise. And perhaps there's a whole conversation there to be had about, you know, the impact of generative AI and the explosion of content on just the consumption experience itself, right? But one question that's really interesting here in the chat, I'd be curious to hear folks' thoughts. And again, if people want to request mics, please try to keep it on topic. The question is from Next Front AI. How do you think AI will impact VR and AR? That's been a hot topic lately, certainly in South by Southwest. I would say last year, the hype cycle, where like, you know, one hype cycle forward now into AI, was all about the metaverse. And I would say my short answer on this is generative AI is crucial to populating the so-called metaverse. But I'm curious, folks, what are your thoughts on how do you think AI will impact VR and AR?
Yeah, I can jump in and just say that I think that the VR AR landscape is very much going to be built on the foundation of how many things can you build that are interesting and novel within those experiences. And I think that AI will help you turbocharge those things and get far ahead of the curve on like creating assets or creating worlds or whatever. And like, especially in the metaverse, I think there's a lot of like companies, Tom Bilyeu, who's, you know, Quest founder and very, very well off, and then is now making Impact Theory. They're trying to create AR. So they're trying to create game-like immersive experiences that have augmented reality in real life. So like things you find in the game will then trigger things in the real world by putting on augmented reality, right? And like the ability to create those assets quickly and create those worlds quickly that are parallels to whatever's in the game. Like that's going to be very, very cool. Like imagine if you could do something in an experience in a metaverse and then you come out and you walk down your street and there's like a search and discovery augmented reality based on what NFTs you hold or what they triggered in the game. And I think that AI is crucial, right? It's absolutely crucial to, that's like I know nothing about coding, but I imagine that's complex. And so I feel like having AI to help code that faster and get the things to be in alignment would be probably pretty essential, but that's also a naive take because I don't code, but that's my thought.
Yeah, I don't think you know AR and VR exists without AI. You know, I just don't think they do it. When like computer vision is a subset of AI. Computer vision is basically looking at images and what you see around the world and interpreting that, and you know, combining it with large language models. And sorry, my wife just walked into the room. So like I honestly I don't think that you can have the AR VR without AI happening. Like it's just such a big piece of it. I'm gonna go ahead and pass the mic. I gotta jump away real quick. One sec.
Samir, do you want to hop in here? I see you're in AR VR tech. We'd love to hear your thoughts.
Hey guys, thank you for having me on. I just jumped in maybe about 5 minutes ago and then noticed the topic actually really pertains to my field of work. Let me just first say I love what you guys have put together. I actually came on here by way of Matt Wolf, the YouTube video that you just posted. Shout out Heather and her space, and I thought to check it out. And here I am sharing with you guys. So thank you so much for putting this together. It sounds really great. The minds, the thoughts of what you got going on now. To the question at hand on AR and VR, I think this is quite interesting. And with the new release of version 5, I think it hits a point of what interests what I'm doing with AR VR in the 360 space. The company I founded and work with is called Rowie Lab. We do virtual tours. We use 360 images and 3D data to basically create immersive experiences, right? And now with the release of version 5 and this tiling integration, I think it's going to open up a very interesting potential of what can be done with creating seamless 360s, right? That naturally might be able to be replicated in different positions as you navigate through a virtual tour experience. And that is very interesting to me. We have been the pioneers of basically taking this virtual tour, which is usually used in a very traditional real estate, capture a space and show it as it is, but take that medium and use it in a creative way for creative storytelling. And we've done that by being able to change the 360s that we capture. And now with this AI Midjourney tiling, I think we might be able to replicate multiple 360s that actually tell a story as you move through a space. And on the AR side, I do think that AI is going to play a big component. I've seen one company do 3D objects straight off from AI, and this is going to speed up the iteration and the the creativity of what's possible within a scene. But even more so, what I think is going to be very, very interesting is this computer vision that Matt was just speaking about, and identifying objects within a scene, and also being able to create metadata through that, understanding what is in an image, what's there, and then being able to create a 3D object from an image that is understood from through the capture process. So these are things that I'm very excited about. I want to see how we can take the real world and create digital twins seamlessly without having to build it out in a digital environment from the hand up, where you have to model, whereas AI can really streamline that process, and then we start tweaking it, as we've seen with the creative process of generating images through prompts. I'll leave it at that, but thank you guys so much. I really look forward to hearing more of what you guys got to offer.
No,
Thank you.
thank you so much for saying something. Oh, go ahead, Bilal.
Yeah, I was just going to say, I mean, you brought up some really good points, and even Matt's point before his wife walked in there, like recently AI is equal to generative AI, but people forget that this has been like a massive field that's been around forevermore. And certainly we wouldn't have had things like face filters and Snapchat, or like AR navigation and maps without computer vision. And like there's so many other aspects of AR that are even classical AI before like machine learning is, is ubiquitous everywhere. Everything from like simultaneous localization and mapping, so you can figure out like where you are in 3D space. All this stuff that powers your Oculus headset or your phone or whatever, it is awesome. And certainly now, like AI is equal to, generative, just like metaverse sort of became Web3 like last year-ish. Like I don't know exactly how that happened. I never got into the Web3 stuff, but to bring this back around, it sounds like there's some really, really interesting applications for AR, VR, especially around content creation, because that has by far been the hardest part about like the so-called metaverses, right? Like, okay, fine, we have TikTok and YouTube Shorts and Reels to start making video a little bit more commodity and easier to create. Like, you don't have to go learn how to use Premiere and like wrangle a DSLR and all this other stuff. You can do it in these like bite-sized mobile apps and create really compelling video content. But that moment for 3D hasn't happened yet, right? Like that almost goes back to Linus's question about, how do you like the question Linus curated about how do you, create 3D content using generative? And so we're at the early, stages of that. Clearly, that's where Midjourney is going. But I think that's going to be huge to see, right? Like if you don't have to learn Blender or Maya to make 3D stuff, you can like scan something, kit bash it together with other things, prompt some stuff into existence. I think that's going to be an amazing future indeed. Curious Pete, do you have something to add on this topic?
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, fascinating discussion, and it's something I've been fascinated with a long time, and I'm just experimenting now. First of all, I totally echo the people that are saying it's going to accelerate a lot. I've been experimenting with it. Chat GPT creating a web page for me, and I'm able to say, right, I want it to look like this, and then I want those list items to do this. I want for each list do this. And I'm just over a few prompts. It's got a fully it's got further than I've managed to get trying to figure out how to code the things myself over like 6 months of messing around for long evenings. It's going to accelerate things, absolutely. On the thinking about the AR particularly, with part of it will come down to actually it won't so much come down to the comfort of the glasses or whatever, because there's going to be variations on it, but the crowdsourcing ability of generating content in AR. When you have this intelligent, AI capturing of information, where am I going to go with it? I think one thing I've just been experimenting with ChatGPT, and what I've realised, what I'm trying to write code with it, I'm thinking, okay, I need a specialist interface for writing code or for writing Amazon apps that leverages this type of stuff. So all the kind of the nitty gritty bits in between are done for me, and it knows it's building it for a specific purpose. But presumably that's the next thing that's going to come along better, because people keep talking about like prompt engineering. Well, what we need is like an amazing variety of front ends for prompting for creating different types of content, and I'm sure that's going to come. but yeah, it's going to accelerate things just a huge amount, and with different ways of capturing information conversationally, around places. You could sort of go for a tour and like listen to other people chatting, maybe had a conversation, wanted to share some interesting information a week ago, and now you can listen to it there while you're looking at the same, statue or something. I'm rambling, but there's huge potential.
Pete, curious Pete, can I just stop you there and just ask you a question? What's your background?
All kinds of different things. Media, film, visual effects, music production. Then from something I came up with while working in one film effects place to do documentation, I came up with an idea that I was trying to get going into about 10 years ago. Didn't manage to get it going, and now I'm kind of seeing some of the potential of where it was going just appearing now. So yeah.
All right, cool. I mean, I think it's really interesting to have you to like have this conversation. I think you obviously come into these new tools and are just trying to embrace them, and I think that's beautiful. I think that's what we want to see. We want to see people like jumping head in and not being afraid of using the tools. It is tools by the end of the day, so it's really interesting to see, and everyone is obviously having a unique journey coming into these tools. I think, Dave, you want to say something, so I'll just give the mic over to Dave, and then we have a new speaker on stage, Chris. So I would like her to be able to just say hi and introduce herself as well. But let's start with Dave, and yeah.
Yeah, definitely would love to hear from Chris. It's been cool to connect and see her work. It's pretty fascinating. The other thing that keeps popping in my head is I'm selfishly asking if people know this, or also where the future might go with like text to full 3D rigged things, or like text to 3D like models, right? Like I think that's going to be, I don't know if that's something I've already missed or there's tools for that, or like I feel like that's going to be a quantum leap forward in terms of what the technology can do, is when you can go from not only text to getting a 2D Midjourney prompt that's like super in depth and whatever, and you can use that. Like some tools like Lilipix, you can rotate it and stuff, but like the first one that can fully create a 3D model that you can put in a game or you can rotate around and look at, like I feel like that is going to be mind blowing, because people can, I mean, you're off to the races then, right? Like video games, movies, all sorts of different art mediums where somebody can do some things with it that's dynamic. Like I feel like that's what I personally am like waiting for someone to do. I will happily pay for a tool that does something like that, because there's just so many cool iterations. So yeah, Chris can feel free to dive in and share whatever, but I'd love to come back to that topic.
Okay, hi everyone. Can you hear me?
Yeah, perfect.
Thank you.
Awesome. This is one of my first times to do this Twitter Spaces, so I don't really know the format, but I'm Chris, and I love to see so many of you. I follow on Twitter, and we support each other. I see Matt and Linus and Heather, and probably more people who are not all on the screen. So, as you all probably know, I did a comic book last year, and I used Midjourney for my visuals. At the time, there was no Chat GPT, so there was no way for me to use any AI for writing my story. So I wrote the story myself, actually, a year before I made this comic book. And then when I made this comic book, I started posting it on Facebook. I wasn't using Twitter back then. I did have an account, but I never used it. And on Facebook, there is a very big community of AI, and people started sharing it. And I also shared it on Reddit, on Discord, and people just kept resharing it. And I saw so many people who didn't like AI and obviously didn't like my comic book. They were writing that I was wasting my time and that it's not copyrightable. So I started asking experts, and I started trying to find the answer, and I couldn't find it. So it seemed like no one quite knew what the situation is in the US. So I decided to copyright it, and I've never done it. So I just went to the website, filled the form as good as I could, and got my copyright pretty much straight away. Maybe in 3 days it was issued, and I was very happy. I did have Midjourney written on the cover, and I was pretty sure everyone by then knew what it was.
And then 2 months later, the copyright office sent me a very angry letter saying that they overlooked it was AI generated. They didn't know what Midjourney was, and they asked me to send them a very detailed cover letter to explain my process for them to decide if they would keep my copyright or not. And I was quite devastated because I just started a new job. It was an AI researcher, and I was unemployed before, so I found a job and I had to work really hard. So I didn't quite have time to write such a detailed cover letter. So I wrote about it everywhere on social media, and someone from Midjourney official Facebook group told me that they could get me in touch with Midjourney team. And after that, 2 lawyers reached out to me and they said that they are going to help me out. And they did help me out writing the cover letter. And you probably read it. Some of you read it because it's available online. They described my process, but from a law point of view, I would never be able to write such letter because it kind of touches on different cases of copyright. And then couple of days ago, the Copyright Office made a decision, and the decision is kind of mixed. First, I did keep my copyright for the comic book as a whole. So I have a copyright for my story and for the arrangement of images. So you indeed can make storybooks and can make comic books using AI-assisted images, and it is copyrightable. But the images by itself, the individual images, aren't copyrightable according to them. So currently, I'm in the process of writing my next application. And again, I asked social media for help, and I said that I need pro bono lawyers. Pro bono means free, and that I would like to submit images that were made in a different way using AI, because I feel like technology stepped forward, because that comic book I made back in August, and now all of you use AI and you know how advanced it became. And the reason why the Copyright Office said no is because they said there wasn't enough control. Even though I wrote very creative prompts and had a lot of iterations, they still said that's not enough for that to be copyrightable. So I'm working on my next application that I hopefully will submit on Monday. And I was talking to several people from the community, and I would love to talk to some of you because these lawyers are from a different firm. They are not connected to Midjourney. They're completely independent. They just want to help community, and they were asking me how people are using those tools to make sure that we submit different images that were made using different process, to see what the Copyright Office thinks, because they kind of opened the door. They said that they are going to have discussions starting in April with lawyers, with AI artists, how those tools are used to make a decision. So I decided to start working on that. And hopefully I will submit the first image on Monday. Lawyers are very slow. That's what I want to tell you. It's like I would submit right away, but they're just telling me that they need to really have a good understanding of the tools and to write a good cover letter, so the Copyright Office really understands the entire process, that it's just an art form, it has creative input, and it has some way of control of the output. That's what they were asking. So yeah.
Chris, I think this is really, really interesting. I just want to touch, like, before you just jumped on, and we're sorry for not setting the stage properly for you. For everyone listening, so Chris is one of the first people that tried to get Midjourney work copyrighted, and she successfully got so, as she just said. So I should have said that before we just put her on stage like that. Thank you so much, Chris. Does anyone have questions for Chris? Heather, maybe you have something you want to touch on?
Yeah, it's something that affects everybody here, and that's just, it's such an interesting story, Chris. And thank you so much for going through all that and just explaining, because the way the ruling came down, it was very confusing. Well, it was confusing, but not. But that experience, it's just amazing. Just things that we're doing every day. Would we be at risk? Um, if the what does it practically mean for artists if you can compose images together in a story that's copyrightable, but the imagery isn't, it's not copyrighted? Does that change if you use things like control net versus text to image?
Yeah, so the image that I'm going to try and copyright on Monday, it uses ControlNet. But I will also have, like, basically I made another comic book and I trained it on my own likeness. So I do use, though, in this comic book both. I use my likeness as a character, and I also use not my likeness, because I want to make sure that I also use just a standard model, Stable Diffusion like 1.5, so other people don't have to use my likeness to, or their likeness, for that to be copyrightable, that they can just create whatever. But I'm going to describe every possible way that is known, and as you know, it gets updated every day. So I try to kind of include every possible technology, and I think it will be an ongoing process for like several weeks of me submitting. And I don't know, maybe someone else will join and submit, because I think it's like, it will be great if more people submit their processes, because I try to use as much technology as I can, but I'm pretty sure that other people may use it slightly differently, to just show them that it's not like a slot machine. The problem with this rejection was that they couldn't quite understand. They thought, I think, of what I read, it's just like I write a prompt and it just gives me images and I keep rerolling until I get what I want. Which in part is true, but it's not like random images. It's not like cats and dogs and clouds and flowers. It's exactly what I requested for. But they wanted more control. They want to show that AI is a little bit like a paintbrush, or like Photoshop. And I think with control nets it's easier to show, but I started describing my process in a kind of big detail to lawyers, and I found that there are actually parts which for us who do AI it's very obvious, but for regular people like lawyers or the copyright office it's really not, and they can easily misunderstand it. And that's why I'm very glad that I have so much support, that someone can tell it in a language that the copyright office will be able to understand, and to kind of make sure that the way I copyright it won't make it restrictive for AI artists. Because at first I thought I will just copyright my comic book with all images where I look like myself, because I thought that's control. Like, Stable Diffusion can't really produce my face, I'm not that famous. But my lawyers actually said that it's good to have such images, but it's also good to have images that were produced with a just regular model, so everyone can use it and everyone can kind of fine tune it the way they want and still have copyrightable result. Did I answer your question?
Yeah, that did help. Go ahead, Dave. No, thank you, Chris. Wow.
Yeah, and just to echo from the Twitter space I was in earlier this week, where there was a lawyer who was talking about this copyright law and stuff like that. I think one of the main, again, I know nothing about legality, so I'm just kind of hopefully paraphrasing what you said, but one of the things that I think they're trying to argue or say is that while the actual tool itself, right, you're using a tool with a very unique combination of words, prompts, inputs, things like that, and it's creating a novel image on the outside in the way that, an artist could use a bunch of different mediums and paints and stuff like that to create the emergent thing that kind of looks like something like the Mona Lisa, but it's not the Mona Lisa, right? So, like, I think that that's maybe the hopeful use case that a lot of us have, is that it's our proprietary use combination of words, ideas, tools, like in different combinations and mediums, that hopefully is what is the intellectual property, along with, like Chris is saying, because I'm writing a story too as well, right? And I'm using like tools and things like that to generate the concept art for it and bring those things to life. But the story and the unique, mixing and matching of these words and different prompts and stuff, I think is where hopefully that's seen as, truly unique and truly not like you're one-to-one copy pasting somebody else's idea. So yeah, just want to jump in and share that from earlier.
So is that so? What they're are they saying that like it's owned by because it's we're copying because the
No,
prompt is it owned by other
in our
people?
favor.
Oh, okay. Because I was trying to understand it as this
Sorry,
like
poor
since
explanation.
what was rendered came from different artists or different artwork online, and so it's like a piece of all these different things
No,
combined. No.
no, like that. The thought was that it is our intellectual property of what comes out the other end in the story in the actual thing, because it's our inputs of ideas and stuff like that that use the tool and point it at a certain direction versus, copy pasting something, or writing someone's words for words, or taking someone's music and using the same thing. And the same, I think one of the arguments that was going around was like, you can't copyright notes in songs, but you can copyright arrangements and or things like that. So it's the same way, like these are all notes, right? These are all words that represent notes, and the song on the outside might become something that is still on our defense that we could hold on to.
Yeah, there is like a few things I learned from talking to lawyers so much. I'm not a lawyer, I'm just an artist. So I learned a lot from talking to them. And one of the things that I didn't quite understand, even when I filed that cover letter that the lawyers read, these other lawyers that I have now, they actually explained it to me that ideas can't be copyrighted, but the execution can. So it's very unlikely that an idea, which is a prompt, the prompt is more or less an idea, that is not copyrightable. But the execution of it, how you make it into life, that is what is copyrighted. So, and another thing what I learned that wasn't very clear to me, I thought that it needs to be creativity, which I could showing my entire process. They didn't, but what they were kind of the copyright office, what they were saying is that there is not enough control of the output. So basically, it's not only creativity, but that kind of control. You have to be a mastermind. And the mastermind, when I read it, I was like, that sounds so bad. But it actually is, as I understand, it's a term that they use. You have to be the mastermind behind your images. And apparently, according to them, I was not a mastermind behind my images because I didn't have full control over making them. So right now it's good to show that there is some way to control that output. And also there is one misconception that I had, even after that letter that we sent. I didn't realize that the amount of effort doesn't count. So that's what they also wrote, is that it doesn't matter how many iterations it took, it doesn't matter how many manual work it took. What matters is to be that mastermind. It can be very easy, but you have to like be in control of the process. So because before, what I thought is that if I can prove how much effort it took me to create those images, like it was version 3 of Midjourney, so it took me a lot of effort to like make some action and to people in the frame. So it was like hundreds of images, like iterations on them, and changing prompt and all of that kind of stuff. But they said that's actually not enough, which isn't bad right now, because now we have such effective prompts and we can get what we want in one prompt. So that is a good part actually. But overall, it will be interesting to see how this unfolds. and I will keep you all updated as much as I can. Yeah.
Thank you, Chris, so much. I'm so glad you were able to come on because I've been following your story for quite a while, and a lot of us have, and it is something, and it's such an ordeal. And I've even worked with in the legal realm for a while, and I understand the process and the length of time it takes in every single character on the page in punctuation has to be a certain way for all these the forms that they have to file and the different procedures they have to go through. So thank you so much. And it is going to be really something else to just watch how this unfolds and see how we are affected by this, because so many of us are using it, especially if they rolled it out if they integrated it with Microsoft and Google. It'll end up being something where seems like it would be very difficult to kind of, like, within office systems and different corporations, these kind of things would end up being very common, not just for images, but for anything that we like, slide PowerPoints or different presentations, things like that, right? But I wanted to say to everybody, thank you all so much. And I was thinking, I hate to cut it off because I wish that we could hear more about this, Chris. I really appreciate it. And this is a epic space again. Thank you all so much. I guess we've closed out a heck of a week, and who knows what's coming next week. I guess it'll be slower, maybe, or it'll be more. But this is our third hour we're going into, and we're getting loopy. I hope everybody was able to eat, and I'm so glad that we all made it here. For those of you who were waiting for the mic, I am so sorry. I have to we'll have to kind of wind it down, but this is just awesome, and it shows how the community is growing. It's growing, and it has grown. We have 206 people or something like that in this room right now, 3 hours in, and we're all, just so much information out there. And this is a place we can kind of all come together in like a hive mindset to kind of share this information. So all these people that you see in here, if you heard like something you heard, make sure you follow them. And Matt's he has his YouTube channel, please. I mean, goodness, in Future Tools, he has all this happening. Linus is doing stuff all the time. And Billawal has YouTube and TikTok on top of Twitter. And then there's people throughout here, Chris. I mean, there's so many people in the audience that have all kinds of different backgrounds and different types of content that you all, please, we can learn so much from each other. And I'm just looking at faces, and I appreciate everybody coming here and like following each other and supporting each other. We're just trying to share information so that we all can do a little bit better and to kind of keep growing this space, because while we have this opportunity right now, we can maximize it. And everybody, we all have an opportunity to do something, and at least even for our own individual selves, to kind of like, take advantage of this and start our own brands and products and collaborate with people, networking. Let's do it. But I just wanted to say, does anybody want to say anything before we go? And I don't want to take up all the time. Taylor, Linus, Matt,
This was a
Bill.
phenomenal space. This was so much good topics. There's such a crazy week, and so much happened. And I think we did a pretty good job recapping it and talking about the implications of what it all means. And, I think next week might actually be another crazy one if I'm just kind of guessing and putting it out into the world.
Hold your tongue on that one. We need some rest.
I think next week we're still going to have some surprises for us. I'm just going to put that out there. But no, this was a great space.
Yeah, GPT 11 is coming out.
Wait,
Matt, how many embargoes have you signed this week?
Well, I think, everybody, please just follow these people. If I said, drop your stuff into the chat, like, so we'll all know what everybody does. It's okay. You can plug yourself. This is safe. Do it. Let's go ahead and we can all get engagement from that too. It will help the algorithm. So let's kind of keep in touch with that. My newsletter is going to be late this week. I don't know about everybody else, but I was waiting to see if maybe the news would stop for a second before I decided what to put in it. But thank you all for, this is just epic. It's so wonderful. And I appreciate everybody's support and coming out. So please have a happy St. Patrick's Day and a safe and happy weekend. Rest up for next week. We'll do it again next Friday.
Bye, guys.
Thank you. Bye.
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 Take care.
Bye.
Bye bye.
Have a
Thank
nice
you all.
weekend.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.